Welcome back to another episode of Infidelity Tales Lab. We're thankful for your continued viewership. Before we begin, tell us, where in the world are you watching from? We love knowing our global reach. Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. The Grind. Ryan Mitchell's hands were stained with grease and exhaustion as he clocked out of his third consecutive overnight shift at the industrial plant. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead like angry wasps, casting harsh shadows across his weathered face. At 34, the former Marine had the kind of build that came from years of discipline and hard work. Broad shoulders, calloused hands, and eyes that missed nothing. The drive home through the pre-dawn darkness gave him time to think about the stack of bills he'd been chipping away at for months. Tiffany's credit card debt had spiraled to nearly $40,000. Designer clothes, spa treatments, expensive dinners with her girlfriends while he ate gas station sandwiches between shifts. She'd come to him crying 6 months ago, claiming she'd made some mistakes and needed help. Ryan had believed her tears were genuine. He'd always been a man who honored his commitments, and marriage was the ultimate commitment. When Tiffany Lambert had walked into his life 3 years ago at his buddy's barbecue, she'd seemed like everything he wasn't: spontaneous, artistic, full of laughter. Her strawberry blonde hair caught the sunlight, and her green eyes sparkled with mischief. She worked part-time in an art gallery, more for fun than necessity, she told him. Coming from his military background where loyalty meant everything, Ryan had courted her properly. 6 months of dates, meeting her family, proposing with his grandmother's ring. Her mother Gloria had seemed pleased enough, though Ryan always sensed she thought Tiffany was settling. The wedding had been modest by Tiffany's standards, but had drained Ryan's savings. Now, pulling into the driveway of their small ranch house in suburban Phoenix, Ryan felt the weight of sacrifice in his bones. He'd taken the overnight shifts specifically because they paid 30% more, enough to cover the minimum payments on Tiffany's debt while still managing their mortgage and bills. She'd promised to get a full-time job to help, but somehow that never materialized. There was always an excuse. The gallery needed her for special events, or she was networking for her art career, or she wasn't feeling well. Ryan had grown up poor, the son of a single mother who worked 3 jobs to keep them afloat. He'd learned early that actions mattered more than words, that sacrifice was how you showed love. His mother had died of a heart attack during his second deployment to Afghanistan, working herself to death to pay for his youngest sister's college. He'd promised himself then that he'd never let the people he loved struggle the way she had. The house was dark except for the porch light Tiffany always left on for him. She'd be asleep, of course. Her art gallery job, when she actually showed up, didn't start until 10 in the morning. Ryan had suggested she might pick up some extra evening work since he was covering nights, but she'd looked at him like he'd suggested she become a street performer. He sat in his truck for a moment, looking at their home. The mortgage was in his name, bought with his military housing benefit. The furniture, the cars, even Tiffany's jewelry, all purchased with his earnings or credit. She contributed maybe $800 a month on a good month, barely enough to cover groceries. But marriage was about partnership, he reminded himself. She brought other things to their relationship: creativity, social connections, warmth. At least, that's what he kept telling himself during the long, solitary hours feeding materials into industrial machines while she slept in their comfortable bed. Ryan's phone buzzed with a text from his shift supervisor. "Double overtime available next week if you want it." He stared at the message, thumb hovering over the reply. The overtime would finally clear the last of Tiffany's debt. 3 months of 16-hour days, living on energy drinks and determination, but it would be done. He typed back, "I'll take it." As he walked to the front door, Ryan allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. Tomorrow, he'd surprise Tiffany with the news that her debt was gone. Maybe they could finally start building something together instead of just surviving. Maybe she'd see how much he'd sacrificed and realize what they had was worth fighting for. The key turned silently in the lock. Years of military training had taught him to move quietly. He was already planning the conversation, imagining her face when he showed her the final payment confirmation. For the first time in months, Ryan Mitchell allowed himself to hope. Chapter 2. The Truth Revealed. 3 weeks later, Ryan stood in the shower at the plant, letting the hot water wash away another night's worth of chemical residue and sweat. The final payment had gone through that morning. $4, 847.32, the last of Tiffany's crushing debt. He'd watched his checking account balance drop to nearly zero, but the satisfaction was worth it. Tonight, he'd drive home with a paid-in full receipt and finally tell his wife they could breathe again. The drive home felt different this time. Instead of the usual weight of financial pressure, Ryan felt lighter. They could start over now. Maybe Tiffany would finally commit to finding steady work, and they could begin saving for the future they'd talked about. Maybe even starting a family. He'd stopped in an all-night diner and bought 2 cups of their best coffee and Tiffany's favorite chocolate croissants. She'd probably be awake soon anyway, and this would be the perfect way to share the good news. For once, he'd be bringing home celebration instead of exhaustion. The neighborhood was quiet at 6:30 a.m., most houses still dark behind drawn curtains. Ryan pulled into his driveway and sat for a moment, savoring the anticipation. In his jacket pocket, the receipt crinkled softly. $40,000 of debt, eliminated through sheer force of will and endless overnight shifts. As he approached the front door, he heard Tiffany's voice through the living room window. She was on the phone, laughing in that bright, musical way that had first attracted him. Maybe she was talking to her sister Lindsay, who lived in California. Ryan paused, not wanting to interrupt what sounded like a happy conversation. "Oh my God, Mom. You should have seen his face when I told him about the debt," Tiffany was saying, her voice carrying easily through the single-pane window. "Like a lost puppy. I swear, sometimes I think he'd work himself to death if I asked him to." Ryan's hand froze on the door handle. Something cold settled in his stomach. No, the idiot actually did it," Tiffany continued, and Ryan could hear Gloria's cackle on the other end of the line. $40,000, Mom. 40,000. And he never even questioned most of it. All those shopping trips I took with Brad, spa weekends, that jewelry, he just kept making payments like a good little soldier. The coffee cups slipped from Ryan's other hand, hitting the concrete porch with a muffled thud. But he couldn't move to pick them up, couldn't breathe properly. "Yes, the whole Brad situation is handled now," Tiffany was saying, and Ryan could hear her moving around the living room. "The debt was the only thing keeping me here, you know? I couldn't afford a decent divorce lawyer with all those payments hanging over me. But now, what about the house?" Gloria's voice was tinny but audible through the phone speaker. "That's the beauty of it, Mom. It's all in his name. The mortgage, everything. Arizona's a community property state, so I'm entitled to half the value, but I won't be stuck with the payments. And since I haven't worked full-time in 2 years, I'll probably get alimony too." Ryan's vision began to narrow, tunnel-like, the way it had during his worst moments in combat. But this was different. In Afghanistan, at least he'd known who the enemy was. "Brad's already got the apartment picked out," Tiffany continued. "Downtown Phoenix, 20th floor, overlooking the valley. His consulting business is doing really well. Did I tell you he's buying into that restaurant franchise? 3 locations. I'll never have to worry about money again." "And Ryan has no idea?" Gloria asked. "About Brad? God, no. Ryan's too trusting for his own good. Too noble." She said the word like it tasted bitter. "He actually thinks all those late nights at the gallery were about work. As if I'd spend my evenings arranging other people's art for $8 an hour." The laughter that followed felt like glass breaking in Ryan's chest. "Honestly, Mother, I don't know how I stood it this long. The constant worrying about bills, living in this little house, driving that beat-up car. Ryan's a good man, but he's so limited. No ambition beyond showing up to work every day. Brad actually has vision, you know? Plans. When will you tell him?" "Soon. I was waiting for him to finish paying off the debt. Didn't want him to stop out of spite. But yes, the idiot paid it all off. Now I can finally afford a good divorce lawyer. Bradley knows someone who specializes in maximizing settlements for women. This is going to work out perfectly." Ryan stood frozen on his own porch, listening to his wife plan his destruction with the casual tone most people use to discuss weekend plans. Every sacrifice he'd made, every double shift, every time he'd chosen her comfort over his own needs, it had all been theater to her. He was a resource to be mined until depleted, then discarded. His hand found the receipt in his pocket. Paid in full. The final proof of his devotion and the key to his wife's escape. Quietly, Ryan placed the receipt on the doormat, where Tiffany would find it when she eventually emerged from their house. He walked back to his truck, started the engine, and drove away. For the first time in months, Ryan Mitchell had no destination in mind. But for the first time in his adult life, he understood what it felt like to be truly, completely alone. Chapter 3. The Call. 2 weeks passed in a blur of cheap motels and long drives through the Arizona desert. Ryan had called in sick to work, something he'd never done in 3 years at the plant. His supervisor, Jerry, had sounded concerned on the phone, but Ryan had assured him it was just a family emergency that needed sorting out. That wasn't entirely a lie. He'd been staying at an extended stay motel off I-17, paying weekly rates and trying to figure out what came next. The place smelled like industrial disinfectant and broken dreams, but it was clean and anonymous. Ryan had always been a man who needed to process things alone, and the small room with its functional furniture and thin walls suited his current state of mind. His phone had been ringing constantly for the first week, Tiffany, her friends, even Gloria calling to check on him. He turned it off after the third day, needing silence to think. When he finally powered it back on, there were 37 missed calls and twice as many text messages. The text started concerned and gradually became frustrated. "Where are you? Are you okay? Ryan, this isn't funny. Come home so we can talk. People are asking questions. You're embarrassing me. Fine, be childish. But you can't avoid this forever." Ryan deleted them all without responding. He'd driven past their house twice, both times seeing Brad Coleman's silver BMW in the driveway. Brad was exactly what Ryan had expected, tall, lean, the kind of man who looked like he'd never worked with his hand a day in his life. Ryan had done his research at the motel's business center, learning everything he could about Bradley Coleman, age 36, marketing consultant, recently divorced, no children. Brad's social media painted a picture of expensive restaurants, weekend trips to Scottsdale, and a lifestyle that probably cost more in a month than Ryan made in 3. His LinkedIn showed a pattern of jumping between consulting firms every 2 years, always seeking new challenges. His divorce records, available through public documents, showed he'd been ordered to pay substantial alimony to his ex-wife for adultery. Apparently, Brad Coleman had a type. On a Thursday morning, Ryan's phone rang with a number he didn't recognize. Phoenix area code. Something told him to answer. "Mr. Mitchell? This is David Park from Sterling, Park & Associates. I represent your wife in a dissolution of marriage matter." Ryan sat on the edge of the motel bed, staring at the water stain on the opposite wall. "I see. Mrs. Mitchell has been concerned about your welfare, sir. She's asked me to reach out and see if we might arrange a meeting to discuss the terms of your separation. I understand this is a difficult time, but these matters are generally resolved more amicably when both parties engage constructively." The lawyer's voice had that practiced smoothness that came from years of delivering bad news to people who thought their lives were stable. "Mr. Mitchell, are you there?" "I'm here," Ryan said quietly. "Good. Now, Mrs. Mitchell has indicated that you've been experiencing some emotional difficulties following the revelation of her relationship with Mr. Coleman. She wants you to know that she hopes this process can be handled with minimal trauma for everyone involved." Ryan's grip tightened on the phone. Minimal trauma. That's correct. She's prepared to be quite reasonable in the property division, given the circumstances. Of course, there will need to be discussions about alimony and the disposition of the marital residence, but she's optimistic we can reach a fair agreement. "Fair," Ryan repeated. "Mr. Mitchell, I have to ask, do you have legal representation? Because if not, I'd strongly recommend you retain counsel before we proceed with any formal negotiations." Ryan stood up and walked to the motel window. Across the parking lot, a woman was loading suitcases into her car while 2 young children waited in the back seat. Starting over, just like he was supposed to do. "Mr. Park," Ryan said finally, "can I ask you something?" "Certainly. How long have you been doing this kind of work?" 15 years, Mr. Mitchell. I've handled hundreds of dissolution cases. And in your experience, how often do the cheating spouses end up happy with their new lives?" There was a pause. I'm not sure I understand the relevance of that question. Just curious about the success rate. Professionally speaking. Another pause, longer this time. Mr. Mitchell, I think it would be best if we scheduled a meeting. Are you available tomorrow afternoon? Actually, Mr. Park, I don't think that will be necessary. Sir, tell my wife, tell Mrs. Mitchell, that she shouldn't worry about me being reasonable. I've been reasonable for 3 years. I've been understanding and accommodating and everything a good husband should be. But I'm done being reasonable now. I'm not sure I follow. You will, Ryan said, and hung up. He sat back down on the bed and opened his laptop. Time to stop reacting and start planning. Tiffany and Brad thought they were dealing with a heartbroken, naive husband who would quietly accept whatever terms they offered. They were about to learn they were wrong about a lot of things. Ryan had spent his entire adult life following rules, honoring commitments, taking the high road. He'd been a good soldier, a faithful husband, a man who believed that doing the right thing mattered. But they'd changed the rules without telling him. And Ryan Mitchell was very, very good at adapting to new operational parameters. Chapter 4, Reconnaissance. Ryan checked out of the motel the next morning and found a furnished apartment in Tempe, close enough to Phoenix to monitor the situation, but far enough away to maintain operational security. The place was nothing special, 1 bedroom, basic furniture, but it came with a month-to-month lease and no questions asked. His first stop was a visit to his old Marine buddy, Tony Reeves, who ran a private investigation firm specializing in corporate security and domestic cases. Tony operated out of a strip mall office that looked unremarkable from the outside, but housed some of the most sophisticated surveillance equipment available to civilians. Jesus, Mitch, Tony said, using Ryan's old military nickname as they sat in his office. You look like hell. Feel worse, Ryan replied. I need a favor, Tony. A big one. Tony leaned back in his chair, studying his old friend. They'd served 2 tours together in Afghanistan, and Tony knew Ryan better than most people. This about your wife? Soon-to-be ex-wife. And her boyfriend. Tony nodded knowingly. You want surveillance? I want everything. Financial records, communications, travel patterns, business relationships. Everything legal, but I want to know more about these people than they know about themselves. Tony was quiet for a long moment. This going to stay legal, Mitch? The investigation will be. What I do with the information, that's going to depend on what we find. That's not exactly reassuring. Ryan met his friend's eyes. Tony, this woman played a 3-year con on me. Made me work myself half to death paying off debt she accumulated sleeping with another man. She's taking half of everything I own and expecting alimony on top of it. Legal isn't getting me justice. It's getting me screwed twice. Tony sighed and opened a new file on his computer. Tell me what you know. Over the next hour, Ryan provided everything he had on Tiffany and Brad. Tony took notes, occasionally asking clarifying questions. When Ryan finished, Tony leaned back and shook his head. Your wife's got expensive taste for someone with no money, he observed. These restaurant receipts you found, the hotel charges. This affair's been going on for at least 18 months, probably longer. That's what I figured. And this Brad character, I know the type. Smooth talker, probably tells women exactly what they want to hear. His business model seems to be short-term consulting contracts with companies that don't do proper due diligence. Tony pulled up Brad's professional profile on his computer. Look at this pattern. Joins a company, promises big results, collects his fee, then moves on before anyone realizes the results aren't sustainable. It's not exactly fraud, but it's not exactly honest either. What about personal stuff? Well, his ex-wife is interesting. Melissa Coleman, remarried name is Torres now. Lives in Scottsdale, works as a real estate agent. According to the divorce filings, Brad was cheating on her too, with a client's wife, no less. She got a decent settlement, but more importantly, she might be willing to talk. Ryan nodded. Set up a meeting. What about your wife? What about her? Tony pulled up another screen. Tiffany's got some interesting financial habits. She's been living way above any reasonable income level for years. Credit cards maxed and paid off repeatedly, always just before they would have gone collections. Someone's been managing her debt very carefully. Meaning this isn't impulsive shopping. This is systematic. She's been planning something for a long time. and she's had help. Ryan felt something cold settle in his stomach. Her mother. Probably. But here's the thing, Mitch, if they've been planning this, they've made mistakes. People always do when they think they're smarter than everyone else. Tony turned his monitor toward Ryan. Your wife opened a new bank account 3 months ago. Business account, under the name TL Creative Consulting. She's been depositing money regularly, small amounts, but consistent. Where's the money coming from? That's what we're going to find out. But I'm betting when we trace it back, we're going to find some very interesting connections. Ryan stared at the account information. 3 months ago was right around the time Tiffany had started crying about her debt, begging him to help her. While he'd been working double shifts, she'd been opening secret accounts. How long will this take? Give me a week for the basic workup. 2 weeks if you want the deep dive. Deep dive, Ryan said without hesitation. It's going to cost. Tony. Ryan's voice was quiet but carried an edge that made his friend pause. I've got $40,000 in savings that I was planning to use to start a family. Instead, I used it to pay off debt my wife accumulated while cheating on me. Whatever this costs, it's an investment. Investment in what? Ryan stood up, extending his hand to shake Tony's. In making sure that actions have consequences. After leaving Tony's office, Ryan drove to the library and spent the rest of the day researching Arizona divorce law, community property statutes, and alimony requirements. He took pages of notes, cross-referencing different scenarios and outcomes. By the time he left, Ryan had a clear understanding of exactly how badly the legal system was about to screw him over. In Arizona, adultery wasn't grounds for denying alimony. Community property meant Tiffany was entitled to half of everything they'd acquired during the marriage, regardless of who earned it or who spent it foolishly. The system was designed to reward Tiffany's behavior and punish his loyalty. But systems had weaknesses. Every system did, and Ryan was very good at finding weaknesses. Chapter 5, The Setup. Melissa Torres agreed to meet Ryan at a coffee shop in Scottsdale, neutral territory, where she'd feel comfortable talking about her ex-husband. She was an attractive brunette in her early 30s, professionally dressed, but Ryan could see the wariness in her eyes when he approached her table. "You're sure you're not a reporter?" she asked as he sat down. "Just a man whose wife is making the same mistakes you did," Ryan replied honestly. Melissa studied him for a moment, then nodded. Brad's type is very specific. Married women with money or access to money. He's got a gift for making them feel special, like they deserve better than whatever they have. "How long were you married?" 4 years. The affair I caught him in wasn't his first, just the first one I had proof of. She stirred her coffee absently. He's very careful about covering his tracks, very good at manipulating situations, so he always comes out looking like the victim. "What do you mean?" "Brad doesn't just cheat. He strategically targets women he can profit from. The woman I caught him with was married to a man who owned a chain of restaurants." Suddenly Brad was consulting for restaurant management. Pure coincidence, right? Ryan felt pieces clicking into place. "What happened after your divorce?" "Brad tried to come back 6 months later, claiming he'd made a mistake, that he loved me. Turned out his restaurant consultation had ended badly. Something about promising results he couldn't deliver. He was probably looking for financial support while he found his next target. Did he ever talk about future plans? Long-term goals?" Melissa laughed bitterly. "Brad doesn't think long-term about anything except his next payday. But he did mention wanting to get into the restaurant business himself someday. Said he'd learned enough from his consulting work to know how to make one successful." After the meeting, Ryan drove to the Phoenix Art Gallery, where Tiffany claimed to work. The owner, a thin man in his 60s named Harrison Webb, seemed surprised when Ryan introduced himself as Tiffany's husband. "I didn't realize Tiffany was married," Harrison said, adjusting his glasses. "She's never mentioned a husband." "She's been working here for 3 years, Ryan said carefully. "Oh no, Mr. Mitchell. Tiffany hasn't worked here in over a year. She quit right around Christmas, said she was pursuing other opportunities." The lie was so casual, so complete, that Ryan almost admired its audacity. For months, Tiffany had been leaving the house every day, claiming to go to work at the gallery. Where had she actually been going? "Do you happen to remember what kind of opportunities she mentioned?" Harrison thought for a moment. Something about event planning, I think. She said she'd met someone who was going to help her start her own business. Ryan thanked Harrison and left, his mind racing. Event planning. Business opportunities. The mysterious bank account Tony had discovered suddenly made more sense. That evening, Ryan parked across the street from his old house and watched. At 7:30 p.m., Tiffany and Brad emerged, dressed for dinner. They climbed into Brad's BMW and drove toward downtown Phoenix. Ryan followed at a distance, his surveillance training making the tail easy and undetectable. They went to Vincent's, one of the most expensive restaurants in the city. Through the window, Ryan watched them celebrate something with champagne and dessert. Brad picked up the check without hesitation, and they lingered over coffee like they had all the time in the world. From the restaurant, they drove to a high-rise apartment complex in downtown Phoenix. The building was new, all glass and steel, with a doorman and valet parking. Ryan watched Brad hand his keys to the valet like he lived there. A quick conversation with the building's night security guard. Ryan claimed to be considering renting an apartment there, revealed that Brad Coleman had signed a lease 3 months ago for a 2-bedroom unit on the 20th floor. Monthly rent, $3,800. 3 months ago, the same time Tiffany had opened her business account and started crying about debt. Ryan sat in his truck across from the gleaming apartment building and felt the last of his illusions dissolve. This hadn't been an affair that got out of hand. This had been a coordinated campaign, planned and executed with military precision. They played him perfectly. The crying wife, the overwhelming debt, the need for his help. While he'd been working himself to exhaustion, they'd been planning their new life together in a luxury apartment he was indirectly paying for. His phone buzzed with a text from Tony. Got preliminary results. You need to see this ASAP. Ryan looked up at the apartment building one more time. Somewhere up there, his wife and her lover were probably toasting their success. Tomorrow, he'd learn exactly how deep their betrayal went. But tonight, Ryan Mitchell began planning their destruction. Chapter 6, The Foundation. Tony's office felt different the next morning, charged with the electric tension that came before bad news. Ryan sat across from his friend's desk while Tony organized a stack of documents and photographs. You were right about the planning, Tony began. This goes back almost 2 years, Mitch. Maybe longer. He slid the first document across the desk. Brad Coleman didn't just randomly meet your wife. He was hired by a restaurant called Meridian to consult on their marketing strategy 18 months ago. Guess who was catering their grand opening event? Ryan looked at the invoice. TL Creative Consulting. Your wife's been running a side business for almost 2 years, providing event planning and catering coordination for upscale venues. She never told you because the income would have meant she didn't qualify for alimony. Tony slid over more documents. Here's where it gets interesting. Brad's consulting contract with Meridian was supposed to be 6 months, but he's been collecting payments for 18 months, and Meridian's revenue has actually declined in that time. He's bleeding them dry. Worse, he's positioned himself as indispensable while systematically undermining their profitability. When they finally collapse, and they will in the next few months, guess who's going to swoop in and buy the assets at bankruptcy prices? Ryan studied the financial projections Tony had compiled. Brad and Tiffany, through a shell company they established 4 months ago, BC Development, LLC. They've already secured preliminary financing based on projections that assume they'll acquire Meridian's customer base and equipment for pennies on the dollar. The scope of the deception was breathtaking. While Ryan had been working double shifts to pay off Tiffany's debt, she and Brad had been constructing an elaborate business scheme that would make them wealthy at the expense of everyone around them. There's more, Tony continued. Remember that debt you paid off? Most of it wasn't shopping sprees and spa days. It was startup capital, equipment purchases and corporation fees, insurance deposits, all disguised as personal expenses. So I funded their business venture. Without knowing it, yeah. And here's the beautiful part. Legally, they're probably in the clear. Deceptive as hell, but not technically fraud. Ryan sat back in his chair, processing the information. What about the restaurant they're targeting? Meridian? Family-owned business, been around for 12 years. The owner, Patricia Hendricks, is a widow trying to keep her late husband's dream alive. She's got 2 employees, both single mothers who've been with her since the beginning. Tony slid over a photograph of Patricia Hendricks, a woman in her 50s with graying hair and tired eyes. She has no idea what's happening to her business. All she knows is that revenue's been declining despite Brad's expensive marketing campaigns. Ryan studied the photo, thinking about his own situation. How many lives were Brad and Tiffany willing to destroy for their ambitions? What's their timeline? Based on the financing documents, they need to move within the next 60 days. Brad's been accelerating Meridian's decline, canceling successful advertising contracts, pushing expensive initiatives that don't generate revenue. Patricia's going to be forced into bankruptcy soon. And then they buy her out for maybe 20 cents on the dollar. She'll lose everything. They'll gain a profitable business. And legally, they've done nothing wrong. Ryan was quiet for several minutes, studying the documents. Finally, he looked up at Tony. I need you to do something else for me. What? I need you to arrange a meeting with Patricia Hendricks. Anonymously. Tell her someone wants to warn her about her marketing consultant. Tony frowned. Mitch, if you're thinking about exposing Brad's scheme. I'm not thinking about exposing it, Ryan said quietly. I'm thinking about something else entirely. Such as? Ryan gathered the documents and stood up. Brad and Tiffany want to play games with people's lives? Fine, but they're about to learn that some people play for keeps. That afternoon, Ryan met Patricia Hendricks at a restaurant during the slow period between lunch and dinner. Meridian was exactly the kind of place Ryan appreciated: honest food, reasonable prices, the kind of neighborhood establishment that formed the backbone of local communities. Patricia was as tired as her photograph suggested, but her handshake was firm and her eyes were intelligent. Tony Reeves said you had information about my marketing consultant? I do, Ryan said, sitting across from her in a booth near the back. But first, I want to ask you something. If you could save your restaurant, what would you be willing to do? Anything legal, she replied without hesitation. Good, because what I'm about to tell you is going to be hard to hear, but it's going to give you a chance to fight back. Over the next hour, Ryan explained everything. Brad's systematic sabotage, the planned bankruptcy acquisition, the shell company waiting to scoop up her life's work. He showed her the financial projections, the timeline, the evidence of deliberate manipulation. Patricia listened in growing horror, occasionally asking for clarification, but mostly sitting in stunned silence. When Ryan finished, she sat back and closed her eyes. 18 months, she whispered. 18 months, I've been blaming myself, thinking I was failing somehow. You weren't failing. You were being destroyed by someone who saw your trust as a vulnerability to exploit. What can I do? I can't afford lawyers. I can't. Mrs. Hendricks, Ryan said gently. What if I told you there was a way to not only save your restaurant, but to make the people who tried to destroy it pay for what they've done? She opened her eyes and looked at him. I'd say that sounds too good to be true. It's not going to be easy, and it's going to require you to trust me even though you don't know me. But if you're willing to fight, I can give you the weapons you need. Patricia Hendricks had spent 18 months watching her husband's dream slowly die, believing it was her fault. Now she understood she'd been the victim of a carefully orchestrated campaign of destruction. What do you need me to do? She asked. Ryan smiled for the first time in weeks. I need you to pretend to be exactly as desperate as they think you are. And I need you to help me set a trap. Chapter 7. The Trap. Ryan spent the next week building what he privately called the Foundation, a complex web of legal documents, financial arrangements, and strategic relationships that would support what came next. His years in the military had taught him that successful operations required detailed planning and multiple contingencies. His first stop was a meeting with Jennifer Walsh, one of Phoenix's most respected family law attorneys. Jennifer was known for her aggressive advocacy and her ability to find creative solutions to complex domestic situations. Mr. Mitchell, she said, reviewing the documents Ryan had provided. This is quite a situation. Your wife has been systematically deceiving you for years, but legally, you're still going to be at a disadvantage in the divorce proceedings. Because Arizona is a no-fault state. Exactly. Her adultery doesn't impact property division or alimony calculations. She's entitled to half of the marital assets and potentially substantial spousal support, regardless of her behavior. Ryan nodded. What if I could prove fraud? Jennifer looked up sharply. What kind of fraud? Identity theft. Forgery. Using marital assets for undisclosed business ventures. Ryan slid another document across her desk. I hired a forensic accountant to examine our joint credit card statements. Tiffany forged my signature on at least 12 major purchases, claiming I had authorized them. Jennifer studied the forensic report, her eyebrows rising. Mr. Mitchell, if this is accurate, your wife committed multiple felonies during your marriage. That changes everything. How so? Arizona law allows courts to disproportionately divide marital assets when one spouse has dissipated community property through illegal activities. Instead of a 50-50 split, you could retain up to 80% of your assets. And spousal support? She'd be lucky to get anything. Ryan had spent considerable time and money obtaining the forensic analysis, but it was worth it. Every signature Tiffany had forged, every fraudulent charge she'd made, was now documented evidence of criminal behavior. What's the next step? We file for divorce immediately, citing fraud and identity theft. We also file for emergency asset protection to prevent her from liquidating or hiding property before the case is resolved. Jennifer paused, studying Ryan carefully. Mr. Mitchell, I have to ask, are you planning to file criminal charges against your wife? That depends on her behavior during the divorce proceedings. Meanwhile, Patricia Hendricks was playing her part perfectly. Following Ryan's instructions, she had approached Brad with desperation that wasn't entirely feigned, begging him to help save her failing restaurant. I don't know what else to do, she told Brad during their meeting, which Ryan was recording through surveillance equipment Tony had provided. Revenue's down 40% from last year. I'm 3 months behind on supplier payments. Brad adopted his most sympathetic expression. Patricia, I've been trying to warn you about market conditions. The restaurant business is brutal right now. Is there anything you can do? Any strategy we haven't tried? Well, Brad said slowly, as if the idea was just occurring to him, there might be one option, but it would require significant changes to your business model. Anything. I'll try anything. I've been working with some investors who specialize in restaurant turnarounds. They might be willing to come in as partners, provide immediate capital injection, help modernize your operations. Patricia looked hopeful. What would that involve? You'd retain operational control, of course, but they'd need majority ownership to justify the investment. Say, 60-40 split. Ryan, listening to the recording later, marveled at Brad's audacity. He was offering to save Patricia's restaurant by stealing it from her and making it sound like he was doing her a favor. I need to think about it, Patricia said. Of course. But Patricia, these investors won't wait long. They have other opportunities they're considering. After Brad left, Patricia met with Ryan at a coffee shop across town. She looked shaken by the experience. He's worse than you described, she said. The way he talks, it's like he genuinely believes he's helping me. Sociopaths often do, Ryan replied. They're very good at justifying their behavior, even to themselves. What happens now? Now we let him think he's won. Tell him you want to meet with his investors. Set up the meeting for next Friday evening, here at the restaurant after closing. And then, Ryan's expression was cold. Then Brad Coleman learns what happens when you try to destroy innocent people for profit. That same week, Ryan received a call from David Park, Tiffany's divorce attorney. Mr. Mitchell, I understand you've retained counsel. I was hoping we could arrange a meeting between all parties to discuss settlement terms. I'm not interested in settling, Ryan replied. Sir, I think you should understand that litigation is expensive and time-consuming. Mrs. Mitchell is prepared to be reasonable. Mr. Park, Ryan interrupted, has your client mentioned her business activities to you? There was a pause. I'm not sure what you mean. Ask her about TL Creative Consulting. Ask her about BC Development, LLC. And ask her about the restaurant venture she's been planning with Brad Coleman. Another longer pause. Mr. Mitchell, are you suggesting? I'm not suggesting anything. I'm stating facts that will come out during discovery. Facts that paint a very different picture of my wife's financial situation and her reasons for seeking divorce. Ryan hung up before the lawyer could respond. Within an hour, his phone was ringing with calls from Tiffany. He let them all go to voicemail. The messages started confused and escalated to angry. What did you tell my lawyer? Call me back right now. Ryan, whatever you think, you know you're wrong. We need to talk. Stop being childish. I know you're hurt, but ruining my life won't make you feel better. Fine. If you want to play games, we'll play games. But you won't win. Ryan deleted the messages without listening to all of them. Tiffany was beginning to understand that her carefully constructed plan was falling apart, but she still didn't comprehend the scope of what was coming. That would change soon enough. Chapter 8, The Reckoning. Friday evening arrived with the kind of desert sunset that painted the sky in shades of amber and crimson. Ryan sat in Tony's surveillance van outside Meridian Restaurant, watching as Brad Coleman arrived for what he believed would be his final conquest of Patricia Hendricks' business. All recording equipment is active, Tony reported from the driver's seat. Video, audio, everything's crystal clear. And the backup? Jennifer Walsh is standing by at her office. The moment we get what we need, she'll file the emergency motions. Ryan watched Brad check his appearance in his car side mirror before walking into the restaurant. He was dressed in an expensive suit, carrying a leather portfolio that probably cost more than most people made in a week. The picture of success built on other people's destruction. Inside the restaurant, Patricia Hendricks was setting the stage perfectly. The dining room was empty except for a single table set for 3, dim lighting creating an intimate atmosphere that would encourage Brad to be indiscreet. At 7 p.m. exactly, a woman entered the restaurant. Ryan recognized her immediately from the photographs Tony had compiled. Tiffany, dressed in business attire that looked like it had cost more than Ryan's monthly salary. Interesting, Tony murmured. Your wife's playing the role of silent investor. Through their surveillance equipment, Ryan could hear the conversation beginning inside. Patricia, I'd like you to meet my business partner, Brad was saying. Tiffany Lambert. She represents the investment group I mentioned. Ryan noted that Tiffany was using her maiden name, another layer of deception in case anything went wrong. Ms. Lambert, Patricia said, shaking Tiffany's hand. Thank you for considering my restaurant. Of course, Tiffany replied smoothly. Brad's told me wonderful things about Meridian. We're always looking for opportunities to support local businesses. The irony was breathtaking. These two people, who had spent the last 18 months systematically destroying Patricia's livelihood, were now positioning themselves as her saviors. Shall we discuss terms? Brad asked, opening his portfolio. For the next 30 minutes, Ryan listened as Brad and Tiffany outlined their investment proposal. They offered to purchase 60% of the restaurant for $40,000, roughly a tenth of what the business was actually worth. In exchange, they would provide operational expertise and marketing innovation. What they were really offering was to buy Patricia's life's work for less than the cost of her kitchen equipment, then rebrand it as their own success story. This is very generous, Patricia said, playing her role perfectly. But I have to ask, how can you be sure the restaurant will be profitable under new management? Brad smiled condescendingly. Patricia, the truth is, your marketing strategies have been outdated. What you need is fresh thinking, modern approaches to customer acquisition and retention. You mean the marketing strategies you've been implementing for 18 months? Brad's smile faltered slightly. Well, yes, but we were limited by budget constraints. With proper investment, the budget you recommended, Patricia continued. The advertising contracts you negotiated. The promotional campaigns you designed. Now Brad looked confused. Patricia, I'm not sure what you're getting at. Patricia reached under the table and brought out a folder. I'm getting at this, Mr. Coleman. She opened the folder and spread out the documents Ryan had provided. Financial projections showing Meridian's decline, evidence of Brad's systematic sabotage, proof of the shell company he and Tiffany had established. What is this? Tiffany asked, leaning forward to examine the papers. This is documentation of your plan to bankrupt my restaurant so you could buy it cheaply, Patricia said calmly. 18 months of deliberate sabotage, marketed as professional consultation. Brad's face went pale. Patricia, I don't know where you got this information, but I got it from someone who cares about justice, Patricia interrupted. Someone who understands what it's like to be betrayed by people you trusted. Tiffany was studying the documents, her expression growing more alarmed by the moment. "These are confidential business plans," she said. "How did you—" She stopped mid-sentence, her eyes widening as she recognized something in the paperwork. "Ryan," she whispered. "That's right," Patricia said. "Your husband provided all of this information, along with some very interesting details about your marriage and your business activities." Brad looked confused. "Husband? Tiffany, you said you were single." "I'm getting divorced," Tiffany said quickly, but her voice lacked its usual confidence. "Are you?" Patricia asked. "Because according to the divorce filings I've seen, your husband is claiming fraud, identity theft, forgery, the kind of charges that carry prison sentences." The restaurant fell silent except for the hum of the air conditioning. Brad was staring at Tiffany with growing understanding, while Tiffany looked like she was trying to calculate her chances of escape. "This is harassment," Brad said finally. "We came here in good faith to help your business. And You came here to steal my business," Patricia corrected. "Just like you stole from your ex-wife. Just like you've stolen from every client who trusted you." She stood up and walked to the restaurant's front door, which she locked with a decisive click. "What are you doing?" Tiffany asked, alarm creeping into her voice. "Making sure we finish this conversation," Patricia replied. In the surveillance van, Tony looked at Ryan. "This is it. We've got them on tape admitting to the scheme, we've got evidence of their relationship, and we've got Tiffany using a false name in a business context." Ryan nodded. "Call Jennifer. Tell her to file everything." But Ryan wasn't done yet. He got out of the van and walked across the street to Meridian's front door. Through the window, he could see Brad and Tiffany sitting frozen at their table, while Patricia stood with her arms crossed, blocking their exit. Ryan tried the door and found it locked. Patricia saw him and walked over to let him in. "Hello, Tiffany," Ryan said as he entered the restaurant. "Fancy meeting you here." His wife's face went through a series of expressions: shock, fear, anger, and finally, a kind of desperate calculation. "Ryan," she said, forcing a smile, "this isn't what it looks like." "Really?" "Because it looks like you and your boyfriend are trying to steal this woman's restaurant, just like you tried to steal my life." Brad started to stand up. "Look, I don't know who you are, but—" "Sit down," Ryan said quietly, and something in his voice made Brad comply immediately. Ryan walked to the table and sat across from his wife. 3 years, Tiffany. 3 years of marriage, and it was all a lie." "That's not true," she said, but her voice was weak. "The debt I paid off wasn't shopping sprees, was it? It was startup capital for your business with Brad. You used me as an unwitting investor, then planned to divorce me and take half of everything else I owned." Tiffany's composed facade was cracking. "You don't understand the pressure I was under. The expectations." "Whose expectations? Your mother's? Brad's? Or just your own greed?" Ryan leaned forward, his voice still calm, but carrying an edge that made everyone in the restaurant nervous. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to dissolve BC Development and return every penny you stole from Meridian's marketing budget to Patricia. You're going to sign a divorce agreement that gives you nothing, no alimony, no property settlement, nothing. And you're going to hope I don't decide to file criminal charges for identity theft and fraud." "You can't," Brad started. "I can," Ryan interrupted. "I have forensic evidence of at least 15 felonies committed during my marriage. And now I have evidence of your conspiracy to defraud Patricia's business. The question is whether you cooperate or whether this ends with both of you in prison." Tiffany was crying now, but Ryan felt no sympathy. These weren't tears of remorse. They were tears of frustration that her carefully constructed plan had failed. "What do you want?" she whispered. Ryan stood up and looked down at the woman he'd once loved. "I want you to understand that actions have consequences. I want you to know what it feels like to lose everything because of someone else's betrayal." He turned to Patricia. "The restaurant is yours, free and clear. The evidence we've gathered will ensure they can't try this again with anyone else." To Brad, he said, "Your consulting business is finished in Phoenix. I'd suggest you find another city, preferably one where they don't check references too carefully." Ryan walked to the door, then paused and looked back at Tiffany one last time. "You said I was too limited, too noble for my own good. You were wrong about the noble part. But you were right about one thing. I am limited. I'm limited by a moral code that prevented me from seeing what you really were. I won't make that mistake again. He unlocked the door and stepped out into the desert night, leaving his former life behind. Chapter 9. New Foundations. 6 months later, Ryan stood in the kitchen of Meridian Restaurant, helping Patricia prep for the lunch rush. The business had not just survived, it was thriving. Word had spread about Patricia's story, and the community had rallied around the restaurant with the kind of fierce loyalty that money couldn't buy. "Order up," Patricia called, sliding 2 plates across the pass. Table 6. Ryan carried the meals to a young couple celebrating their anniversary. They thanked him with the kind of genuine warmth he'd forgotten existed. Simple interactions, honest work, people who meant what they said. It was a different world from the one he'd inhabited with Tiffany. The divorce had been finalized 3 months ago. Jennifer Walsh had proven as ruthless as advertised, using the evidence of Tiffany's fraud to secure a settlement that left Ryan with full ownership of their house, his retirement accounts, and even reimbursement for the debt he'd paid off. Tiffany had received exactly what she'd contributed to their marriage: nothing. The criminal charges had been another matter. Ryan had ultimately decided not to file them, not out of mercy, but out of pragmatism. Tiffany and Brad's scheme had collapsed so completely that pursuing criminal prosecution would have been like shooting at ghosts. Brad had left Phoenix within a week of the confrontation at Meridian, his reputation in ruins. The business community was small and interconnected, and word of his methods had spread quickly. His consulting practice had evaporated overnight. Tiffany had moved back in with her mother in Tucson, her dreams of restaurant ownership reduced to a part-time job at a coffee shop. The apartment she and Brad had shared was in foreclosure, another victim of their overextended ambitions. "Ryan," Patricia called from behind the counter. "Your friend Tony's here." Ryan walked over to where Tony was sitting at the bar, reading a newspaper and drinking coffee. "How's the PI business?" Ryan asked. "Can't complain. Actually had 3 new clients this week. All of them referred by attorneys who heard about our work on your case." Tony folded his newspaper and looked at his friend. "You look good, Mitch." "Relax. I feel good. Honest work, honest people, honest pay. Turns out that's all I ever really wanted. No regrets about the restaurant business?" "Patricia offered to make you a partner." Ryan shook his head. "This isn't my dream, it's hers. I'm just helping her protect it." They sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes, watching the lunch crowd. Families, business people, elderly couples who'd been coming to Meridian for years. The kind of community that formed naturally around places that provided genuine value. "Ryan," Patricia called. "Phone for you." Ryan walked to the office and picked up the call. It was Jennifer Walsh. "Mr. Mitchell, I have some interesting news. Tiffany's mother called this morning." "Gloria? What did she want?" "She's concerned about her daughter's situation. Apparently, Tiffany's been having difficulty finding work, and Gloria was wondering if you might be willing to help with some financial support." Ryan was quiet for a long moment. "What did you tell her?" "I told her that ship had sailed, but I wanted you to know in case she tries to contact you directly." "She won't," Ryan said with certainty. "Gloria's smarter than that. There's something else. I got a call from an attorney in Tucson representing someone named Bradley Coleman." Ryan's attention sharpened. "What does Brad want?" "He's claiming you interfered with his business relationships, cost him income and reputation. He's threatening to sue for damages." Ryan actually laughed. "Let him try. We have hours of recorded evidence of him committing fraud. Any lawsuit he files will just give us another forum to present that evidence publicly." That's what I told his attorney. "I don't think we'll hear from him again." After hanging up, Ryan returned to the dining room, where Patricia was dealing with a minor crisis. They'd run out of their signature dessert and had 3 tables asking for it. "We could make more," she said, "but it takes 2 hours to set properly." "What about that bakery down the street?" Ryan suggested. "Their chocolate cake is almost as good as yours. We could offer it as a substitute with a discount." Patricia nodded and made the call. The customers were understanding, even appreciative of the honesty and the discount. Problems solved through straightforward communication. Another concept that felt revolutionary after years of living with deception. As the day wound down, Ryan found himself thinking about the path that had brought him here. A year ago, He'd been working overnight shifts to pay off debt he didn't know was fraudulent, married to a woman who saw him as a resource to be exploited. Now, he was part of a community, contributing to something that mattered, surrounded by people who valued honesty over manipulation. The phone call from Gloria had been predictable. Narcissists always came back when they needed something, convinced that their previous victims would eventually forget and forgive. But Ryan's capacity for forgiveness had been permanently altered by Tiffany's betrayal. He'd learned the difference between mercy and enabling, between compassion and weakness. Some people deserved second chances. Others had forfeited their right to his consideration. As closing time approached, Patricia started cleaning the coffee machine while Ryan wiped down tables. The routine had become comfortable, purposeful in a way his old life had never been. "Ryan," Patricia said, not looking up from her work, "I want you to know something." "What's that?" "When you first approached me about Brad and Tiffany, I thought you might be just another angry ex-husband looking for revenge. What changed your mind?" "The way you insisted on protecting my employees during the confrontation. The way you made sure they got bonuses when the business improved. The way you turned down partnership in the restaurant because you said it belonged to me and my family." Patricia finally looked at him. "Revenge would have been about hurting them. What you did was about protecting people. There's a difference." Ryan nodded, understanding exactly what she meant. Revenge was personal, selfish, ultimately unsatisfying. Justice was about restoring balance, protecting the innocent, ensuring that actions had appropriate consequences. He'd sought justice, not revenge. And in finding it, he discovered something more valuable than satisfaction. He'd found peace. The last customer left, and Ryan locked the front door while Patricia finished the cash register. Tomorrow they'd open again, serve honest food to grateful customers, and continue building something worthwhile. Ryan Mitchell had learned that some betrayals couldn't be forgiven, some people couldn't be trusted, and some relationships couldn't be salvaged. But he'd also learned that endings could become beginnings, that destruction could clear the ground for something better, and that a man's character wasn't determined by how he handled success. It was determined by how he handled betrayal. As he walked to his truck, Ryan thought about Tiffany one last time, not with anger or regret, but with a kind of cold satisfaction. She tried to break him, tried to use him, tried to discard him when she was finished. Instead, she'd set him free. And freedom, Ryan had discovered, was worth any price. And there you have it. Another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen. And I'll see you there. Subscribe to Infidelity Tales Lab for more stories. Now let's begin this one. Chapter 1. Innocence Lost. Adrian Diaz pressed his palm against the bedroom wall, feeling the texture of the paint he'd chosen 3 years ago, a soft blue called Twilight Harbor. He'd spent 2 weekends perfecting this room for his son, measuring twice and cutting once, just like his father taught him. Architecture had trained him to see spaces differently, to understand the bones of a structure. But fatherhood had taught him something else entirely. That home wasn't just walls and foundations. It was the breathing, laughing, crying life contained within them. "Daddy, I don't want to sleep here anymore." Tommy stood in the doorway, his dinosaur pajamas 2 sizes too big, his brown eyes reflecting the nightlight's amber glow. At 6 years old, he had Adrian's serious expression and his mother's olive complexion. The boy clutched a worn stuffed elephant named Mr. Trunk. "Buddy, we talked about this." Adrian knelt down, meeting his son at eye level. "There's nothing under your bed. We checked together, remember? Something breathes there." Tommy's voice dropped to a whisper. "I hear it when the house gets quiet, like someone's sleeping." Adrian had heard this for 3 nights now. The rational part of his mind, the part that had calculated load-bearing walls and structural integrity for 15 years, dismissed it as childhood imagination. Kids feared the dark. They feared monsters. It was normal, expected even. But something in Tommy's voice tonight felt different. Not the manufactured fear of a child seeking attention, but genuine terror. "All right, champ. Let's check again. Together." They moved to the bed, Adrian lifting the blue comforter he and his wife Brandy had bought from that overpriced boutique she loved. He clicked on his phone's flashlight and swept it beneath the bed frame. Dust bunnies. A forgotten Hot Wheels car. One of Tommy's lost sneakers. Nothing else. See? Just like before. Nothing scary here. Tommy didn't look convinced, but he nodded slowly. Adrian tucked him in, reading 2 chapters of their current book about a boy detective, and waited until his son's breathing evened into sleep. As he pulled the door closed, leaving it cracked as Tommy preferred, he heard the soft footsteps of his wife coming up the stairs. Brandy Diaz had changed since they married 8 years ago, though Adrian couldn't pinpoint exactly when or how. She'd always been beautiful, striking, really, with long dark hair and a smile that had disarmed him on their first date at that Vietnamese restaurant in Brooklyn. But lately, there was a distance in her eyes, a preoccupation she blamed on stress from her marketing job. "He asleep?" she asked, not quite meeting Adrian's eyes. Took a while. He's still insisting something's under his bed. Brandy's expression flickered. Was that fear? Before settling into practiced concern. Kids and their imaginations. That's what I said, but Adrian paused at the top of the stairs. Maybe we should talk to his teacher? See if something's bothering him at school. He's fine, Adrian. Don't make it into something it's not. Her tone carried an edge that hadn't been there before. She moved past him toward their bedroom. I'm exhausted. Early meeting tomorrow. Another early meeting. The 3rd this week. Adrian watched her close the bedroom door behind her and felt the familiar weight of something unspoken settling between them. He headed to his home office, really just a converted spare room with his drafting table and computer, and pulled up the security system app on his tablet. 2 years ago, after a break-in spree in their Queens neighborhood, he'd installed cameras at the front door, back door, and garage. The system had given him peace of mind, especially when he traveled for work. Now, an idea formed. If Tommy's fears persisted, maybe having footage proving nothing was there would help. Adrian opened Amazon and ordered a small motion-activated camera with night vision. 2 days shipping. He could mount it in Tommy's room, angled toward the bed, and show his son definitive proof that he was safe. What Adrian couldn't know, was that this simple decision would shatter every assumption he held about his life, his marriage, and the people he trusted most. Chapter 2. The recording. The camera arrived on Thursday afternoon in discreet packaging. Adrian waited until Brandy left for her yoga class, another new habit from the past 6 months, before installing it. He positioned the small device on Tommy's bookshelf, partially hidden behind a row of Dr. Seuss books, angling it to capture the bed and the floor beneath it. What's that, Daddy? Tommy watched with curious eyes as Adrian made final adjustments. It's a special camera that's going to prove to you there's nothing to be afraid of. It'll record while you sleep, and tomorrow morning we'll watch it together. You'll see, just you sleeping peacefully all night. Tommy seemed skeptical but willing. That night, Adrian activated the camera through his phone app before kissing his son goodnight. Remember, buddy, the camera's watching over you. Nothing can hurt you. What if the breathing thing doesn't like cameras? Adrian forced a smile. Then it'll have to answer to me. He spent the evening in his office, working on a proposal for a medical center in New Jersey. Architecture had always been his meditation, the clean lines and precise measurements providing order in an increasingly chaotic world. Around 11, he heard Brandy come home, later than usual for a yoga class. Her footsteps moved quickly up the stairs, and their bedroom door clicked shut with finality. Adrian stayed up until nearly 1 a.m., then checked the camera feed one last time before bed. The night vision showed Tommy sleeping soundly, Mr. Trunk clutched to his chest. Nothing else moved in the frame. Satisfied, Adrian headed to bed, finding Brandy already asleep or pretending to be. Morning came with autumn sunlight streaming through the windows. Adrian woke before everyone else, his internal clock still set to construction site hours from his early career days. He made coffee, started breakfast, and pulled up the camera app on his phone while scrambling eggs. The footage showed 8 hours of recording. Adrian fast-forwarded through the early hours, watching Tommy shift positions, roll over, hug his stuffed elephant tighter. Normal sleeping child movements. He felt relief building. This would put Tommy's fears to rest. Then the timestamp hit 2:47 a.m. Adrian's finger paused over the screen. In the grainy night vision, something moved. Not Tommy, he was still asleep. But there, from beneath the bed, a shape emerged. At first, Adrian thought it was a trick of the shadows or the camera quality. He rewound and watched again, his breakfast growing cold on the counter. 2:47 a.m. A hand appeared first, gripping the carpet. Then an arm. Then a head, a grown man's head, emerged from beneath his son's bed, moving with slow, deliberate care. The figure crawled out completely, rising to a crouch beside Tommy's sleeping form. Adrian's blood turned to ice. The man stood there for nearly 3 minutes, watching Tommy sleep. He was tall, wearing dark clothes, his face partially obscured but clearly visible enough to see he was studying the child. Then, just as slowly, he lowered himself and slid back beneath the bed, disappearing from view. The coffee mug slipped from Adrian's hand, shattering on the kitchen tile. His mind raced through impossibilities. There was no space under that bed for a grown man. He'd looked. He'd checked. The bed sat maybe 8 inches off the ground, barely enough for storage boxes. Unless Adrian's architectural mind kicked in. The house was built in 1987, a classic Queens colonial. He'd studied the original blueprints when they bought it. The basement extended under most of the first floor, but Tommy's room was above the garage, which had a crawl space beneath it for utilities, and, Jesus Christ, there was access to that crawl space through a panel in the garage wall. Adrian had noticed it during inspection, but never thought about it again. Someone could crawl through the foundation, through the garage wall, up between the floor joists, and emerge through the floor itself. They'd have to remove floorboards, create a hidden access point. Adrian was already moving, taking the stairs 2 at a time. He burst into Tommy's room, where his son was just waking up. "Morning, Daddy. Stay here." Adrian's voice came out harder than intended. He dropped to his knees, shoving the bed away from the wall with adrenaline-fueled strength. There, in the hardwood floor, nearly invisible unless you knew what to look for, a section of boards that didn't quite match the others. 3 planks, maybe 18 inches wide with tiny gaps around the edges. Adrian grabbed the edge and pulled. The section lifted like a hatch, revealing darkness below and a ladder descending into the crawl space. "Daddy? What's wrong?" Adrian's hand shook as he pulled out his phone and dialed 911. "This is 911. What's your emergency?" "Someone's been in my house. In my son's room. I have video evidence. I need police here immediately." He rattled off his address, his voice surprisingly steady given the terror coursing through him. "Officers are on their way, sir. Are you in immediate danger?" "I don't know." Adrian looked at the open hatch, at the darkness below. "I don't know." Chapter 3. The Officer's Reaction. Officer Rufus LeBlanc had been with the NYPD for 19 years, working out of the 108th Precinct. He'd seen domestic disputes, gang violence, robbery, assault, the full spectrum of human ugliness that came with policing one of New York's outer boroughs. Not much surprised him anymore. But when Adrian Diaz showed him the footage on his phone, LeBlanc felt something he hadn't experienced in years: genuine dread. "Play it again," LeBlanc said, his Louisiana accent thickening with stress. Adrian complied, and they watched the 2:47 a.m. sequence for the 3rd time. The figure emerging, watching, disappearing. "Sir," LeBlanc's brown face had gone ashen. "That's not. We need to evacuate your house. Now." "Why? Who is it? Do you recognize him?" LeBlanc was already radioing for backup, his words coming fast. "I need additional units at 47 to 12 Parsons Boulevard. Possible 10 to 30. Possible connection to the Taylor investigation. Send detectives. Send everyone." "Taylor investigation? What are you talking about?" Adrian's voice rose. "Tell me what's happening." Brandy appeared at the top of the stairs, wrapped in her robe, eyes wide. "Adrian, why are the police here?" LeBlanc looked between Adrian and Brandy, something shifting in his expression. "Mrs. Diaz, I'm going to need you to step outside with your husband and son. This house is now a crime scene." "A crime scene? For what?" But Adrian saw something in his wife's face. Recognition? Fear? Guilt? Officer LeBlanc, Adrian said slowly, his architect's mind piecing together patterns. You said Taylor, as in a person named Taylor. Before LeBlanc could answer, more police cars arrived, their lights painting the quiet residential street in red and blue. Neighbors emerged onto porches, phones already recording. Tommy clung to Adrian's leg, sensing the adult terror even if he didn't understand it. Detective Oswaldo Simon arrived within 10 minutes, a stocky man in his 50s with steel-gray hair and eyes that missed nothing. He took LeBlanc aside, spoke in low tones, then approached Adrian. Mr. Diaz, I'm Detective Simon. I need you to tell me everything from the beginning. Adrian recounted it all. Tommy's complaints, the camera installation, the footage, the discovery of the hidden hatch. Throughout his explanation, he watched Brandy, saw her face grow paler, saw her hands tremble slightly before she shoved them in her pockets. And you had no knowledge of this access point? Simon asked. None. I checked under that bed multiple times. I never thought. Adrian stopped. You know who this is, don't you? This person in my house, watching my son sleep. I don't know. I don't believe you. I don't know. Brandy's shout matched his. Do you think I wanted any of this? Do you think I asked for him to come back into my life? He's insane, Adrian. He was always intense, always possessive, but now he's something worse. I'm terrified of what he might do. Good, Adrian said coldly. Now you know how Tommy feels every night. How I feel every time I close my eyes and see that footage of stranger hovering over our son. He stood, done with this conversation. At the door, he paused. I'm taking Tommy to stay somewhere else. Somewhere safe. Don't contact us. Don't come by. When this is over, if we're all still alive, we'll figure out what happens next. But right now, you're on your own with the consequences of your choices. As Adrian walked out, he heard Brandy sobbing behind him. Part of him, a small, dying part, wanted to turn back and comfort her. But the larger part, the part that had watched a stranger crawl from beneath his son's bed on grainy night vision, kept walking. Chapter 5, Betrayal Revealed. Adrian didn't go home. Instead, he drove to his office in Manhattan, a converted loft in the garment district that he shared with 2 other architects. It was after hours, the building quiet except for the hum of traffic outside. He sat at his drafting table, staring at blueprints that suddenly seemed meaningless. His phone buzzed. Detective Simon. Mr. Diaz, there's been a development. Can you come back to the precinct? 20 minutes later, Adrian was back in the interview room, this time with Simon and 2 FBI agents. Special Agent Luigi Brennan, a tall man with prematurely gray hair, and Special Agent Jeanette Hunt, a sharp-eyed woman in her 30s. Mr. Diaz, Warner Taylor is more than just a local criminal, Brennan said without preamble. He's connected to a larger network. The jewelry heist 3 months ago, it was funding for something bigger. We've been tracking him as part of a multi-state investigation. What does this have to do with my family? Everything, potentially. Hunt opened her laptop, showing surveillance photos of Warner meeting with unknown individuals. Warner Taylor doesn't act alone. He has associates, including his brother, Anton Cordova, who changed his last name to distance himself from Warner's record. Anton is the smart one. No arrest record. Works as a software engineer at a tech firm in Brooklyn. But he's the brain behind Warner's operations. You're telling me this is organized crime? White-collar crime meeting violent crime, Brennan clarified. Anton plans sophisticated thefts, identity fraud, corporate espionage, high-value robberies. Warner executes them. Together, they've stolen over $2 million in the past 3 years. We just haven't been able to prove it or catch them in the act. Adrian processed this. And my wife? What does she fit? Hunt and Brennan exchanged glances. That's what we're trying to determine. We've been monitoring Anton Cordova for 6 months, which is how we knew Warner was in New York. But we lost track of Warner after the jewelry heist. Now we know why. He went underground. Literally. Simon pulled out a new stack of documents. We've dug deeper into your wife's background. 10 years ago, when Brandy was dating Warner, she worked as a junior marketing associate at Silvercrest Financial. Silvercrest was handling wealth management for several high-profile clients, executives, athletes, old money families. So, 3 months after Brandy and Warner broke up, Silvercrest discovered a data breach. Someone had copied sensitive client information, account numbers, social security numbers, investment portfolios. They never figured out who, but several clients were victims of identity theft shortly after. The company covered it up to avoid publicity. Adrian felt his stomach drop. You think Brandy gave Warner that information? We don't think. We're investigating. But here's what we know for sure. 3 of the high-value robberies Warner and Anton pulled in the past few years targeted homes of people who had accounts at Silvercrest during that exact period. The timing is suspicious. If Brandy was involved back then, why would Warner wait 10 years to come back? Adrian asked, his mind working through the logistics like he would a structural problem. Because he was in prison, Hunt said. And because 10 years ago, Warner and Anton weren't as sophisticated. They were small time. But now they're planning something bigger, and Warner believes he needs Brandy's help. Why would she help him now? She has everything to lose. Brennan leaned back in his chair. Blackmail is a powerful motivator. Warner knows what Brandy did a decade ago. If that information came out, if it could be proven she was complicit in corporate espionage and identity theft, she'd face federal charges. Prison time, loss of her career, her reputation, her son. Adrian's hands clenched into fists. So he's been threatening her, forcing her cooperation. That's our working theory. But Mr. Diaz, here's the concerning part. We think Warner's endgame involves using your family as leverage. Your architectural firm has designed security systems for several high-value buildings, correct? Yes. Medical centers, corporate offices, some residential complexes. Any banks? Financial institutions? Adrian's blood ran cold. We consulted on the renovation of Paragon Trust Bank's flagship branch in Midtown. We didn't design the vault security, but we handled the building layout, the structural. That's what we thought. Hunt pulled up architectural diagrams on her laptop, Adrian's own work. These blueprints are on your office server. Warner and Anton have been trying to access them for 2 months. We've been monitoring their attempts. They haven't succeeded yet, but they're getting closer. You're saying Warner has been living in my house to eventually force me to give up building plans for a bank heist? Not just building plans. They need real-time access. The renovation included biometric security, motion sensors, digital locks. But you helped design emergency override systems in case of fire or structural failure. You know the fail-safes. Adrian stood, pacing the small room. This is insane. Even if they force me to help, there are dozens of people involved in that building's security. Paragon Trust has private security, local police response. They're planning to hit it during the Thanksgiving long weekend, Brennan interrupted, when security is minimal and response times are slower. And yes, they need inside help, which is why they've been studying your family, learning your patterns, figuring out exactly how to manipulate you. By threatening Tommy, the words came out flat, emotionless. Adrian had moved past shock into something colder, more calculating. His architect's mind was now working on a different kind of structure, the framework of Warner's plan, looking for weak points. Your son is leverage, Hunt confirmed. But so is your wife. Warner hasn't shown his hand yet because he's still setting the pieces in place. The fact that you discovered him changes his timeline. He'll move faster now, which makes him more dangerous. Where is Brandy in all this? Simon exchanged a glance with LeBlanc. Mr. Diaz, we believe the person in your footage is Warner Taylor. Does that name mean anything to you? No. Should it? Warner Taylor is wanted in connection with armed robbery, assault, and stalking. He's been missing for 3 months. We've been tracking his movements, but he's been elusive. Simon turned to Brandy. Mrs. Diaz, does the name Warner Taylor mean anything to you? The silence stretched for 5 seconds. 10. 15. Brandy? Adrian's voice cracked. Do you know who this is? When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. I knew him. Before we met. A long time ago. You knew him. Adrian felt something cold and terrible spreading through his chest. Someone broke into our house, created a secret entrance, has been watching our son sleep, and you knew him? It's not like that. Then what is it like? Explain it to me. Adrian's shout made Tommy cry, and he immediately knelt down, pulling his son close. I'm sorry, buddy. I'm sorry. Daddy's just scared. Simon stepped between them. Mrs. Diaz, I'm going to need you to come down to the station and answer some questions. Voluntarily, for now. Mr. Diaz, we'll need your full cooperation as well. But first, we need to search this house thoroughly. What followed was hours of systematic investigation. Police descended into the crawl space with flashlights and cameras. They found evidence of recent habitation, food wrappers, a sleeping bag, a battery-powered lamp. They found a modified panel in the garage wall, the clever carpentry that allowed someone to move through the foundation undetected. And they found photographs, dozens of them, printed and tacked to the crawl space walls like a shrine. Photos of Tommy at school, at the playground, sleeping in his bed. Photos of Brandy leaving for work, coming home, in her car. And photos of Adrian himself, unaware he was being watched, going about his life while a predator studied his family from the shadows. Adrian sat on his front lawn, Tommy in his lap, watching police carry evidence bags from his violated home. His wife stood 20 feet away, talking to Detective Simon, her body language defensive and closed off. Daddy, Tommy said softly, I told you something was breathing under there. You did, buddy. You were right, and Daddy was wrong. Adrian kissed the top of his son's head. But you're safe now. I promise you're safe. Except Adrian wasn't sure if that promise meant anything anymore. Because as he watched his wife avoid his eyes, as he replayed the footage in his mind, as he thought about all those late nights and behavioral changes and new habits over the past 6 months, a terrible question formed. Just how much had Brandy known? And for how long? Chapter 4, Dark Secrets. Adrian sat in the precinct's uncomfortable plastic chair, having given his statement 3 times in 3 different ways. They'd separated him from Brandy immediately, taking her to a different room. Tommy was with Adrian's mother across town, the only place Adrian felt safe sending him. Detective Simon returned with coffee and a manila folder thick with documents. He sat across from Adrian in the small interview room, the fluorescent lights humming overhead. Mr. Diaz, I want to be straight with you because I think you deserve the truth. Simon opened the folder. Warner Taylor and your wife dated for 2 years, ending about 10 years ago. The relationship was turbulent. Taylor has arrests for domestic violence, not against your wife, against a previous girlfriend. After he and Brandy split, there was a restraining order filed. Adrian's hands tightened around the coffee cup. She never told me any of this. I figured. Here's what we know. Warner Taylor was released from Rikers 6 months ago after serving time for assault. 3 months ago, he robbed a jewelry store in Manhattan with 2 accomplices. During the robbery, he pistol-whipped a security guard who's still in physical therapy, learning to walk again. One of his accomplices was caught, gave up Warner's name. We've been hunting him since. And you think he's been living in my house? In your crawl space, yes. The evidence is clear. But here's what I need you to understand. Warner Taylor didn't just randomly choose your house. He found your wife. He knew exactly where she lived, where she worked, where she sent her son to school. Simon pulled out several photographs from the folder, the ones recovered from the crawl space. Look at the timestamps on these. The oldest ones are from 4 months ago. This wasn't a recent thing. He's been watching your family for a third of a year. Adrian's mind was reeling. For months. Brandy had changed 4 months ago. The late nights, the distance, the new classes and commitments. The way she'd started locking her phone. The unexplained nervousness. She knew. Adrian said flatly. Didn't she? Simon's expression confirmed it before his words did. Your wife claims she didn't know he was in the house. But phone records show contact between them. Text messages, calls. Some deleted, some recovered by our forensics team. Show me. Simon hesitated, then slid his tablet across the table. Adrian scrolled through the reconstructed message thread, his heart sinking with each exchange. Warner, I never stopped thinking about you. Brandy, Warner, you can't contact me. I'm married. I have a son. Warner, I know. I've seen him. Beautiful kid. He has your eyes. Brandy, stop. Please. If Adrian finds out. Warner, meet me. One time. I just want to talk. Brandy, this is insane. Where are you even staying? Warner, closer than you think. The messages continued, becoming more frequent, more familiar. Brandy agreed to meet him, once at a diner in Manhattan, once at a park in Brooklyn. The messages never explicitly referenced the crawl space, but there was an intimacy in their exchange that made Adrian sick. Is she under arrest? Adrian asked quietly. Not yet, but we need to understand what she knew and when she knew it. Her lawyers arrived, so unless we charge her, she'll be leaving soon. But Mr. Diaz, Simon leaned forward. Warner Taylor is dangerous. He's armed, he's desperate, and he's obsessed with your wife. The fact that he's been this close to your family without acting violently is actually concerning. It suggests he's planning something bigger. Like what? We don't know. But men like Taylor don't invest this kind of time and risk without an endgame. Adrian stood abruptly, the chair scraping linoleum. I need to talk to her. That's not a good idea right now. I don't care. She's still my wife. She owes me an explanation. She owes Tommy an explanation. Simon studied him for a long moment, then nodded. 5 minutes. We'll be right outside. They led Adrian down the hall to another interview room. Brandy sat at a similar table, looking smaller than he'd ever seen her. Her lawyer, a sharp-looking woman in her 40s named Ashley Horton, stood immediately. Mr. Diaz, my client has been advised not to speak with you without counsel present. I'm her husband, which is exactly why you shouldn't be having this conversation. Horton looked at Simon. This is highly irregular. 5 minutes, Simon repeated, and closed the door, leaving them alone with the lawyer. Adrian sat across from his wife. Up close, he could see she'd been crying, her mascara smudged. But he felt no sympathy, only cold fury. How long have you known? Adrian, how long? His voice echoed off the walls. Mr. Diaz, the lawyer warned. Brandy held up a hand to silence her attorney. I didn't know he was in the house. I swear to God, Adrian, I didn't know. I thought. Her voice broke. He contacted me about 2 months after getting out of prison. I told him to leave me alone. He kept texting, calling from different numbers. I finally agreed to meet him just to tell him face to face to stop. And did he stop? He said he would. He said he'd made mistakes, but he'd changed. He just wanted closure. I believed him. Tears streamed down her face. I was stupid. I was so stupid. I should have told you, should have told the police, but I was scared you'd think that you were having an affair. I wasn't. I swear I wasn't. It was just, he knew things about my past. Things I never told you. He said if I involved police, he'd tell you everything. And I couldn't. She covered her face with her hands. I couldn't lose you. I couldn't lose Tommy. Adrian felt something breaking inside him. Instead, you let a violent criminal stalk our family. You let him watch our son sleep. You put Tommy in danger because you were protecting secrets. It's not that simple. It is exactly that simple. Adrian slammed his palm on the table. I checked under that bed, Brandy. 3 times. I assured our son he was safe. I told him there were no monsters. And all that time, you knew there might be something to fear. You knew Warner was somewhere in the picture, and you said nothing. I didn't know he was in the house, she repeated weakly. But you suspected something. These past months, the distance, the lies, the late nights. You were terrified, and instead of trusting me, instead of protecting our son, you chose to protect yourself. The lawyer stepped in. Mr. Diaz, I think. Where is he? Adrian cut her off, his eyes locked on Brandy's. Where would Warner go? He's not in the crawl space anymore. Police have been there. So where is he? Simon answered. We released her 2 hours ago. We don't have enough to hold her, and her lawyer was threatening lawsuits. We've put a protective detail on her, but she could still be working with Warner. Adrian finished the thought. We don't know. Her phone records show coercion. Fear. But we also can't rule out voluntary cooperation. The situation is complex. Adrian sat back down, his mind racing. What do you need from me? Your cooperation, Brennan said. We want to set a trap for Warner and Anton. Use you as bait. They'll come for you eventually, try to force your cooperation. When they do, we'll be ready. And if they come for Tommy instead? We'll have protection on him 24/7. Nobody will touch your son. Adrian looked each of them in the eye. I have a better idea. You want to catch Warner and Anton? I'll give them exactly what they want. Access to those building plans. But on my terms. Hunt frowned. What are you suggesting? I'm suggesting we don't wait for them to come to us. I'm suggesting we make them think they've won, that they've broken me. I'll modify the security plans, build in fatal flaws that only I know about. When they attempt the heist, they'll walk into a trap of my design. Brennan shook his head. Mr. Diaz, you're not a law enforcement officer. This isn't about law enforcement, Adrian interrupted, his voice hard. This is about a man who watched my son sleep, who terrorized my family, who manipulated my wife and invaded my home. You want to arrest him? Fine. But I want to make sure he never threatens another family again. And the only way to do that is to beat him at his own game. Simon studied Adrian carefully. You understand what you're proposing is extremely dangerous? I understand architecture. I understand systems and structures and how to make something collapse from the inside. Warner Taylor wants to steal from a bank I helped design. He wants to use me. Then he's going to learn that I'm not some passive victim. I'm the architect of his downfall. The room fell silent. Finally, Brennan spoke. We need authorization from the brass. We need fail-safes, backup plans. And you need to be wired, monitored, every step documented. Whatever it takes. Hunt looked at Adrian with something like respect. Your wife, if she contacts you, you can't tell her anything about this plan. I know. Adrian's jaw tightened, because I still don't know if I can trust her. As he left the precinct for the second time that day, Adrian felt a strange clarity. The shock and betrayal were still there, a constant ache in his chest. But beneath that was something else, cold, focused determination. Warner Taylor had made a critical mistake. He'd underestimated the quiet architect, assuming Adrian was just another mark to manipulate. Adrian pulled out his phone and called his mother. Mom, keep Tommy with you for the next few days. Don't tell anyone where you are. I'll explain everything soon, but right now, I need you to trust me. Adrian, you're scaring me. I know, but everything's going to be fine. I'm going to fix this. I promise. After hanging up, Adrian sat in his car and pulled up the architectural plans for Paragon Trust Bank on his tablet. He designed emergency access points, structural weaknesses meant to allow evacuation in disasters. But the same principles that made a building safe could be used in reverse, to make certain areas inescapable. Warner Taylor wanted to rob a bank. Adrian would help him, and in doing so, build the perfect cage. Chapter 6. The Danger Escalates. Adrian spent 2 days preparing, barely sleeping, eating only when his body demanded it. He worked in his office, modifying the Paragon Trust building plans with surgical precision. The FBI had given him a secure laptop with encrypted files, monitoring his every keystroke to ensure nothing leaked prematurely. The plan was elegant in its simplicity. Adrian would create false weaknesses in the security system, blind spots in camera coverage, delayed response times in motion sensors, a backdoor in the biometric security that appeared exploitable but would actually trigger a lockdown protocol. When Warner and Anton attempted to use these vulnerabilities, they'd find themselves sealed inside a vault with nowhere to go. But first, Warner had to believe Adrian was broken. On the third night, Adrian returned to his house for the first time since the discovery. Police had finished processing it as a crime scene, and the crawlspace entrance had been sealed with steel plates and concrete. The house felt different now, violated like a body after surgery. Every shadow held menace. Brandy's car wasn't in the driveway. According to Detective Simon's updates, she was staying at her sister's house in Long Island, under protective surveillance. They hadn't spoken since the precinct. Adrian poured himself a bourbon, something he rarely did, and sat in his home office. The FBI had equipped him with a recording device disguised as a smartwatch. Everything he said and did from now on would be monitored. His phone rang at 11:47 p.m. Unknown number. Adrian let it ring twice, steadying his breathing, then answered. Hello, Adrian Diaz. We need to talk. The voice was male, smooth, educated, not what Adrian expected from a violent criminal. Who is this? My name is Anton Cordova. My brother has been staying in your home. I apologize for the distress this has caused you and your family." Adrian's grip tightened on the phone. The FBI agents in the surveillance van outside would be recording this, tracking the call. He needed to keep Anton talking. "Your brother is a criminal who terrorized my son. Apologize to my face, you coward." A soft laugh. "I understand you're angry. I would be too, but I think you'll want to hear what I have to say. Your wife, Brandy, she's in a difficult position. So are you. So is your son. But there's a way through this that leaves everyone intact. I'm not interested in deals with criminals. You're interested in keeping your family safe. You're interested in keeping your wife out of federal prison. And most importantly, you're interested in making sure nothing happens to Tommy." A pause. "That is your son's name, correct?" Thomas Andrew Diaz, age 6, attends PS 147, loves dinosaurs and that stuffed elephant. Ice filled Adrian's veins. "If you touch my son, nobody wants to touch anyone, Mr. Diaz. I'm a businessman, not a monster. My brother, admittedly, has his issues, but I keep him in check. What I'm offering is a transaction. You help us with a small project, and in return, your wife's past stays buried, your son stays safe, and you can go back to your normal life." "What project?" "I think you know. Paragon Trust Bank. We need your expertise with the security systems. Just information, nothing more. You won't be involved in the actual work." Adrian forced incredulity into his voice. "You're insane. I'm not helping you rob a bank. You don't have a choice." Anton's tone sharpened. "Let me be clear about your position. Brandy gave my brother corporate data 10 years ago. We have evidence, emails, recorded conversations, documentation that would hold up in court. If that surfaces, she faces federal charges. Conspiracy, corporate espionage, accessory to fraud. 10 to 15 years minimum. She was coerced. Was she? The evidence suggests otherwise. Young woman, ambitious, romantically involved with the wrong man, made poor choices. That's how prosecutors will frame it. And Tommy? He goes into foster care, while both his parents deal with legal nightmares." Adrian let silence stretch, as if considering. When he spoke again, his voice was quieter, defeated. "What exactly do you want from me?" "Smart man. I'll be in touch with specifics. For now, just know that we're watching. The protective detail on your family? We know their shifts, their blind spots. The agents watching your house? We know when they rotate. You can't hide from us, Adrian, but you can work with us. Think about it." The line went dead. Adrian sat motionless for 10 seconds, then exhaled. His hands were shaking, not from fear, but from controlled rage. Special Agent Brennan's voice came through the hidden earpiece he wore. "Good work, Adrian. We got a location on that call. Cell tower in Brooklyn. Moving units now." But Adrian barely heard him, because at that moment, his doorbell rang. He stood slowly, checking the security camera feed on his phone. His blood turned to ice. Warner Taylor stood on his front porch, looking directly into the camera, smiling. Adrian's hand moved toward the panic button the FBI had installed, but Warner raised a phone, showing a text message on the screen. "Don't call anyone. Just talk. 2 minutes." Every instinct screamed at Adrian to hit the button, to bring the FBI agents rushing from their van. But something in Warner's posture, in the almost casual way he stood there, suggested this wasn't an attack. This was a test. Adrian opened the door slowly, his smartwatch recording everything. Up close, Warner Taylor was handsome in a dangerous way. Sharp features, intense eyes, the kind of man women found attractive until they learned what lay beneath. Bold, showing up here. "I wanted to meet you face to face. Man to man." Warner's voice was different from his brother's. Rougher, more volatile. "I owe you that. You owe me a lot more than that." "True." Warner tilted his head, studying Adrian. "You love her, don't you? Brandy. I can see it. Same way I loved her. Same way I still love her. You don't know what love is. Maybe not your kind of love, but I would do anything for her. I have done anything for her. 10 years ago, she asked me to help her get ahead, to prove herself. So I did. Now I need her to return the favor. By threatening her son." Warner's expression hardened. "I would never hurt that kid. But my brother? Anton doesn't have my restraint. He sees people as numbers, as assets. Tommy is leverage to him, nothing more. Me? I remember what it's like to be 6 years old and scared. I remember monsters under the bed. Except mine were real, and they wore my father's face. Adrian felt an unwelcome flash of sympathy, which he immediately crushed. Spare me the tragic backstory. You're a criminal who stalked my family. I protected your family. Warner stepped closer. You have no idea what Anton is capable of. The people he works with. If I hadn't been there, watching, someone else would have been. Someone worse. I made sure nobody touched Tommy. I made sure Brandy stayed safe while we worked out the details. By hiding in my house like a roach. Warner's jaw tightened. Believe what you want. But here's the truth. You're going to help us with Paragon Trust. Not because of threats, but because it's the only way to end this. We do the job, we disappear, and you never see us again. Refuse, and Anton brings in others. People who won't care about your son's nightmares or your wife's tears. You're giving me an ultimatum. I'm giving you a way out. There's a difference. Warner pulled a burner phone from his pocket and set it on the porch railing. This phone will ring tomorrow at noon. Answer it. We'll discuss the technical details. And Adrian, Warner's eyes locked with his. Don't try to be a hero. Heroes in situations like this usually end up dead, and their families end up suffering. Just give us what we want, and this all ends clean. Warner walked away, disappearing into the darkness before Adrian could respond. The FBI agents erupted from their van seconds later, weapons drawn, but Warner was gone, vanished like he'd never been there. Adrian stood on his porch, staring at the burner phone, his mind racing. The smartwatch had recorded everything. The FBI now had Warner's voice, his face on camera, his explicit threats. It should have felt like progress. But all Adrian felt was the weight of escalating danger. Because Warner was right about one thing. Anton Cordova was the real threat. Warner was violent but emotional, predictable in his volatility. Anton was cold calculation, a chess player who thought 10 moves ahead. And Adrian was about to play against both of them. Detective Simon approached, his face grim. We'll analyze everything. Figure out his approach vector, how he evaded surveillance. He's done this before, Adrian interrupted. Multiple times, probably. He's a ghost. You're not going to catch him by following protocols. So what do you suggest? Adrian picked up the burner phone, weighing it in his hand. I suggest we do exactly what he expects. I answer this phone tomorrow. I give them what they want. And when they commit to the heist, we make sure it's the last crime they ever attempt. Simon looked uncomfortable. Adrian, you're too emotionally invested. We need you thinking clearly. I'm thinking clearly. For the first time in days. Adrian met the detective's eyes. These men invaded my home. They threatened my son. They corrupted my wife. They think they can manipulate me because I'm just an architect, just a civilian. But they're wrong. Because every building I've ever designed, I've also imagined how to destroy. Every security system I've built, I've thought about how to defeat. It's what makes me good at my job, understanding both construction and destruction. He held up the phone. Tomorrow, I become their partner. They're inside man, and I build them something beautiful. A trap so perfect they won't see it until it's too late. As Adrian went back inside, bolting the door behind him, he didn't feel like a victim anymore. He felt like what he'd always been, an architect. But now, instead of building structures to stand, he was designing one to fall, with Warner and Anton inside it. Chapter 7. The Plan. The burner phone rang at precisely noon. Adrian was in his office, surrounded by architectural plans spread across his desk like a war map. Special agents Brennan and Hunt watched from across the room, recording equipment running. This is Adrian. Good. You answered. Anton Cordova's voice was businesslike. Let's discuss Paragon Trust. I need you to walk me through the security systems, specifically the vault access and the emergency override protocols. And if I don't, then we move to Plan B, which involves a visit to PS 147 during recess. Your son likes the swings, I understand. Quite fond of them. Adrian's free hand clenched into a fist. You stay away from him, then cooperate. It's simple mathematics, Adrian. Help us, and everyone walks away intact. refuse, and we escalate. I don't want to escalate. Escalation is messy, expensive, and draws unnecessary attention. Adrian took a slow breath. I need guarantees. Once you have what you want, this ends. Completely. Brandy's past stays buried. My family is left alone, and you disappear. You have my word. Your word means nothing. Then you'll have to trust that I'm a pragmatist. Harming your family after a successful job serves no purpose. It only creates risk. I eliminate risk, not create it. Adrian pretended to consider, letting silence build tension. Finally, the vault has 3 security layers. The outer door is titanium-reinforced steel with a biometric scanner, palm print, and retinal scan from authorized personnel. The second layer is a time delay lock with a 48-hour maximum delay. The third layer is... Stop. Anton cut him off. Not over the phone. We'll meet in person. Tomorrow night, 10 p.m., at the construction site on Queens Boulevard and 47th. The abandoned hotel renovation. You know it. I know it. Adrian's firm had done preliminary work on that project before it stalled due to funding issues. Come alone. My brother will search you for wires, weapons, recording devices. If you're clean, we talk. If not, we take this conversation to a more persuasive setting. I'll be there. Smart man. Oh, and Adrian, bring the original security plans. Not copies, not digital files. I want the physical blueprints with your firm stamp. Insurance, you understand. The line went dead. Brennan immediately stood. That's our location. We can have tactical teams in position by tomorrow night. No. Adrian's voice was firm. If you flood that area with agents, they'll spot it and disappear. Warner knows surveillance patterns. Anton probably has counter-surveillance measures. You put uniforms anywhere near that site, and this whole thing falls apart. Hunt leaned against the desk. So what's your plan? They want the blueprints? I'll give them blueprints. Modified ones. I've been working on them for the past 2 days. Adrian pulled up his laptop, showing the altered plans. Look at these modifications. I've created what appears to be a 3-minute window when the security system resets during the Thanksgiving weekend maintenance cycle. To anyone looking at these plans, it seems like the perfect opening. But it's a trap. The reset window actually triggers a lockdown protocol I designed for emergency situations, bank robbery scenarios, terrorist attacks. Once triggered, every door seals, every exit locks, the ventilation system switches to a containment mode. It takes NYPD's specialized unit about 10 minutes to override it from the outside. Brennan whistled low. So they break in during their window, and suddenly they're trapped inside the vault. Exactly. No hostages, no escape, no variables. Just them, alone, in a sealed room, waiting for arrest. Hunt paused. That's actually brilliant. But what about the meeting tomorrow? Warner's going to search you. We can't wire you up. I don't need a wire. I need you to trust me to handle this conversation and come out alive. Adrian met their eyes. I've been thinking about this from their perspective. Anton is careful, paranoid. He'll have contingencies. But Warner? Warner's emotional, impulsive. The cracks in their partnership are showing. Did you hear how Warner talked to me last night? He almost sounded like he wanted me to understand him. That's ego. That's vulnerability. You think you can turn Warner against his brother? I think I can make Warner hesitate at the critical moment. And hesitation is enough. Simon, who'd been quiet, finally spoke. You're playing a dangerous game, Adrian. These men are killers. They're thieves who escalated to violence. There's a difference. Killers enjoy the act. These two, they use violence as a tool. And tools can be countered with the right leverage. Over the next 24 hours, Adrian prepared meticulously. He created the false blueprints, making them look authentic down to the coffee stains and folding creases. He studied everything the FBI had on Warner and Anton, their backgrounds, their previous jobs, their psychology. Warner Taylor, father died when he was 8, stepfather was abusive. First arrest at 16 for assault, defending his younger brother from their stepfather. Pattern of violence always connected to protection or perceived injustice. Did 3 years for breaking a man's jaw after witnessing domestic abuse. Anton Cordova, genius-level IQ, full scholarship to MIT. Dropped out junior year after being caught hacking the university's financial system. No violent crimes. Only white-collar offenses, always operating through intermediaries. Likely sociopathic tendencies. Lack of empathy, pure calculation. The contrast was stark. Warner was the weapon. Anton was the hand that wielded it. Adrian's phone buzzed. A text from Brandy. Please let me see Tommy. Please. I know you hate me, but he's my son too. Adrian stared at the message for long seconds before typing back. After this is over. If we're all still alive, focus on staying safe. Her response came immediately. I'm so sorry. For everything. I should have trusted you. Yes, you should have. Adrian didn't send anything else. The next night, Adrian drove to the abandoned hotel construction site. The building was a hollow skeleton, concrete and steel rising 7 stories with empty windows like dead eyes. Construction equipment sat idle, gathering rust. It was perfect for a clandestine meeting, isolated, full of sight lines, easy to secure. Adrian parked his car and walked toward the building, carrying a weatherproof tube containing the rolled blueprints. His heart hammered, but his hands were steady. Somewhere in the darkness, FBI agents were positioned at a distance, far enough not to be spotted, close enough to respond if things went wrong. Adrian Diaz. Warner's voice came from the shadows. He stepped into view, flanked by another man who had to be Anton. Similar features but refined, wearing an expensive coat and designer glasses. I'm here, as promised. Warner approached and, without preamble, began patting him down. The search was thorough, professional. Adrian had come clean, knowing anything else would end the conversation before it started. He's clear, Warner called to his brother. Anton stepped forward, extending a hand. Adrian, thank you for being reasonable. Adrian didn't shake it. Let's get this over with. They moved inside the building's ground floor, where Anton had set up a temporary workspace, a folding table with a laptop and portable lights. Adrian spread the blueprints across the table, watching as Anton examined them with intense focus. This is the maintenance reset window. Anton pointed to the section Adrian had modified. Yes, every Thanksgiving weekend, between 2 and 5 a.m., the system runs a diagnostic. During that 3-minute window, the biometric scanners and motion sensors are offline. It's the only vulnerability in the entire system. And you designed this vulnerability? No. It's standard protocol for any high-security system. You need diagnostic windows to ensure everything's functioning correctly. I just know exactly when and how to exploit it. Anton studied the plans for several minutes, comparing them to something on his laptop. Adrian's pulse quickened. If Anton had somehow obtained the original plans to compare, the deception would be obvious. Finally, Anton nodded. This is good. Very good. With this information, we can execute the plan. And then we're done. Your word. My word. Anton's smile didn't reach his eyes. Though I'm curious, Adrian. You seem almost too willing to help. Why is that? Because you've left me no choice. And because I've realized something. If I fight you, my family suffers. If I help you, at least this ends. I'm not a hero. I'm just a father trying to protect his son. Warner, who'd been watching silently, spoke up. He's telling the truth. I can see it. You can see it? Anton's tone was mocking. Since when are you a human lie detector? I know people. I know when they're broken. He's broken. Adrian looked at Warner, letting his genuine exhaustion and fear show. I haven't slept more than 3 hours since I found that footage. Every time I close my eyes, I see you in my son's room. So yes, I'm broken. Congratulations. You win. Anton rolled up the blueprints. Good. Then we understand each other. The job happens Thanksgiving night. You don't need to be involved beyond providing this information. Afterward, you'll never hear from us again. What about Brandy? The evidence from 10 years ago. Destroyed. I keep my agreements. Adrian nodded slowly. Then we're done here. As he turned to leave, Warner caught his arm. Wait, I need you to know something. About Brandy. Warner, Anton warned. She didn't want any of this. Warner continued, ignoring his brother. I forced her hand. I was obsessed, stupid. I thought if I could just talk to her again, remind her of what we had. I'm sorry. For what I put your family through. Adrian looked at Warner's hand on his arm, then up at his face. For a moment, he saw something human there. Regret. Maybe even shame. Sorry doesn't change what you did, but it tells me something important. You're not like your brother. You can still feel remorse. What's your point? Adrian lowered his voice, speaking directly to Warner. My point is this. When this all goes down, think carefully about who you're really loyal to. Because from where I'm standing, Anton has used you your whole life. He's the brain, you're the muscle. He gets the money, you take the risks. How much longer are you going to let him treat you like a tool? Warner's eyes flickered with something. Doubt? Anger? But before he could respond, Anton stepped between them. That's enough. Warner, let him go. To Adrian, drive safe. And remember, if you contact the police, if you try anything clever, the consequences fall on your family first. Adrian left without another word, walking back to his car with slow, deliberate steps. Once inside, he drove 3 blocks before pulling over and letting out a shaky breath. His phone buzzed. Agent Brennan, good work. We got audio and visuals from the surveillance van. Anton's voice just gave us probable cause for wiretaps. Adrian typed back, focus on Warner. He's the weak link. If we can flip him, Anton loses his enforcer. Risky. Warner's violent and unpredictable, which is exactly why he can be turned. Anton relies on pure logic. Warner operates on emotion. And right now, he's emotional about what he did to Brandy, to my family. That guilt is a lever we can pull. Adrian started driving again, his mind already moving to the next phase. The trap was set at Paragon Trust. The FBI knew the plan, but there was still one wild card, Warner Taylor's conscience. If Adrian could get Warner to turn on his brother at the critical moment, it wouldn't just be a successful arrest. It would be poetic justice. The weapon turning on the hand that wielded it. And Adrian was very good at building things that worked exactly as designed. Chapter 8. The Execution. Thanksgiving morning arrived cold and gray. Adrian spent it with Tommy at his mother's house in Astoria, watching the parade on TV and pretending everything was normal. Tommy had adjusted surprisingly well, asking fewer questions about where Mommy was and why they weren't at home. Daddy, are the monsters gone? Tommy asked during a commercial break. Yes, buddy. The monsters are gone. Promise? Adrian pulled his son close. I promise. And you know Daddy never breaks his promises. That evening, after Tommy went to bed, Adrian sat with his mother in her kitchen. Elena Diaz was 72, a retired nurse who'd raised Adrian and his sister as a single mother after their father died. She knew something was wrong. Mothers always knew, but respected his silence. Mijo, whatever you're planning, be careful. I will, Mama. And Brandy, is she coming back? Adrian sipped his coffee. I don't know. What she did, keeping secrets, letting that man near Tommy, I don't know if I can forgive that. Marriage is complicated. People make mistakes. Some mistakes have consequences. Elena reached across the table, covering his hand with hers. Just make sure you're not punishing her forever for being afraid. Fear makes us do terrible things. Adrian didn't answer, but her words settled uncomfortably in his chest. At 9 p.m., Adrian received a text from Brennan. Teams in position. Warner and Anton departed Brooklyn 30 minutes ago, heading toward Manhattan. Adrian replied, I'm heading to the surveillance location. You sure you want to watch this? Stay with your son. I need to see it through. The FBI had set up a mobile command center in a van 4 blocks from Paragon Trust Bank. When Adrian arrived, he found Brennan, Hunt, and a half-dozen other agents monitoring multiple screens, showing feeds from the bank's security cameras. Any sign of them? Adrian asked. Not yet. Hunt pointed to a timeline on the wall. The fake maintenance window you wrote into the plan starts at 2:47 a.m. According to your blueprints, that's when they'll make their move. Adrian studied the bank's exterior on the monitors. The building was dark except for emergency lighting, the streets mostly empty. This was the dead zone of the holiday weekend, when even New York slowed to a crawl. What if they don't come? Asked a young agent named Raleigh Huber. They'll come, Adrian said with certainty. Anton has been planning this for too long. He's invested too much. And Warner needs to prove himself to his brother. to prove the years in prison weren't wasted. The hours crawled past. At 1:30 a.m., Adrian grabbed coffee from convenience store, the liquid bitter and too hot. At 2:15 a.m., Brennan's radio crackled. Movement detected. Southeast corner. All eyes snapped to the monitors. Two figures, dressed in black, approached the bank's service entrance. One was taller, moving with Warner's aggressive confidence. The other was slimmer, precise in his movements. Anton. They're following your plans exactly, Hunt whispered. Adrian watched Warner produce tools from a backpack, working on the service entrance lock. The picks were professional, expensive. Within 90 seconds, the door swung open. Phase 1 complete. Anton's voice came through their intercepted radio communications. Interior access achieved. They moved through the bank's corridors, avoiding the active security cameras, following the path Adrian had marked on the blueprints. Every step was calculated, rehearsed. They were professionals, and they were good. At 2:43 a.m., they reached the vault access point. For minutes until the window, Warner said, checking his watch. Adrian leaned forward, his heart hammering. This was it. The moment when his trap would spring or fail spectacularly. At 2:47 a.m. exactly, Warner began his bypass procedure on the biometric scanner. On the monitors, Adrian watched him attach a device, likely loaded with copied palm prints and retinal scans stolen from Paragon Trust employees. Access granted, Anton said, satisfaction in his voice. Told you this would work. Moving to vault door. The massive titanium door began its opening sequence, its mechanisms humming. Warner and Anton stepped forward, entering the vault chamber. And that's when Adrian's modifications activated. The vault door slammed shut behind them with pneumatic force. Emergency lights blazed to life, washing the vault in red. Every exit sealed simultaneously. The main door, the emergency access, even the ventilation system switched to lockdown mode. On the monitors, Adrian watched Warner spin toward the door, then toward his brother, confusion and rising panic on his face. What the hell? Warner's voice came through their comms. Anton, what's happening? The door sealed. The whole vault is sealed. Anton's voice, for the first time, carried tension. He moved to a control panel, attempting to access it. This shouldn't be possible. The maintenance window should have. He stopped, looked up at the security camera, and smiled. Adrian Diaz, you clever bastard. In the command van, Brennan was already coordinating. All units move in. Repeat, all units converge on Paragon Trust. Suspects are contained. But Adrian was focused on the monitor, watching Warner's realization dawn. The bigger man grabbed his brother's shoulder, spinning him around. You said this was clean? You said the plans were good. They were good. Adrian altered them. He set us up. Anton's voice was calm, calculating even in disaster. It's actually impressive. Impressive? We're trapped in a bank vault. This is your genius plan. Our plan. You're as complicit as I am. No. Warner's voice dropped to something dangerous. This is on you. Like everything else. Like that jewelry store guard who's in a wheelchair now. Like forcing Brandy to help. Like using a 6-year-old kid as leverage. This is all you. Adrian leaned closer to the screen, barely breathing. Don't start with moral superiority. Anton shot back. You've enjoyed every second of this life. The money, the thrill, the power. You're not some victim I manipulated. Maybe not, but I'm done being your weapon. Warner pulled something from his pocket. A gun. He pointed it not at the door, not at the camera, but at his brother. Warner, don't be stupid. For once in my life, I'm being smart. This ends now. One way or another. Brennan swore. We need to move faster. If he shoots his brother, it complicates everything. But Adrian held up a hand. Wait. Just wait. On screen, the brothers faced each other in the sealed vault. Warner's gun steady. Anton's hands raised in placating gesture. Think about this, Anton said. Shooting me doesn't open these doors. It doesn't help you. All it does is add murder to your charges. Maybe I don't care anymore. Maybe I'm tired of being the monster in everyone's story while you play the civilized genius. Then what? You want to confess? Turn yourself in? Beg for mercy? Maybe. Warner's voice cracked. Maybe I want to stop being afraid of what I've become. Anton laughed bitterly. It's too late for redemption, brother. We crossed that line years ago. No. Warner lowered the gun slightly. It's too late for you. But me? Maybe I can still surprise people. Through the vault's external intercom, activated by the FBI, Brennan's voice boomed. Warner Taylor, Anton Cordova, this is the FBI. The building is surrounded. In approximately 3 minutes, we will override the vault lockdown and enter with tactical teams. Put down any weapons and lie face down on the floor. Warner looked at the camera, and for a moment, his eyes seemed to find Adrian through the lens. Tell Adrian Diaz, Warner said slowly. Tell him I'm sorry. For real this time. And tell him Brandy never wanted any of this. She was protecting her family. That's all she was ever trying to do. Then Warner dropped the gun and lay on the floor, hands behind his head. Anton stood frozen for a moment, his expression unreadable. Then he too complied, moving with precise, controlled movements even in defeat. Subjects are cooperative, Brennan reported, moving to apprehend. As tactical teams stormed the building, Adrian sat back in his chair, exhaling tension he'd held for days. It was over. Warner and Anton were contained, cooperative, defeated. Hunt looked at him with something like awe. You did it. You actually did it. We did it. Adrian corrected. But yes, it worked. How did you know Warner would break? Because he's not truly a criminal. Not at his core. He's a damaged person who made terrible choices. His brother is the real sociopath. Warner just needed permission to stop being a monster. Brennan's phone buzzed. He listened, then hung up with a grim expression. They're secured, both in custody. But Warner's asking to speak with you before we transport them. Me? What? He says he has information. About Brandy. About 10 years ago. Says he'll only tell you. Adrian considered. This could be another manipulation, another trap. But his curiosity, his need to understand what had really happened, overrode caution. Take me to him. Chapter 9. Victory and Justice. They brought Adrian to the bank just as dawn was breaking, painting the Manhattan skyline in shades of gold and pink. Warner Taylor sat in the back of an FBI vehicle, hands cuffed, looking somehow smaller than before. An agent opened the door, and Adrian slid in beside him. For a moment, neither spoke. You won, Warner finally said. Fair and square. This wasn't a game, wasn't it? You played it like one. Set the board, moved the pieces, trapped your opponent. That's strategy. That's genius. Adrian didn't respond to the compliment. You said you have information about Brandy. Warner nodded slowly. 10 years ago, when she gave me that Silvercrest data, it wasn't her idea. It was mine. I convinced her it was victimless, that we'd only target rich people who wouldn't miss the money. She was young, in love, and I was very persuasive. She still made the choice. She did. But here's what you don't know. After we broke up, after she filed a restraining order, she tried to fix what she'd done. She contacted the FBI, tried to turn evidence over against me. But I've been careful, kept her fingerprints on everything, her voice on recordings. Made sure if I went down, she'd go down harder. Adrian felt something cold settle in his stomach. You framed her. I protected myself. And yeah, in doing so, I destroyed any chance she had at clearing her name. Then I went to prison, and she thought it was over. She built a life, married you, had Tommy. But when I got out, Warner's voice dropped. I couldn't let her go. I told myself I just wanted closure, wanted to see if we could reconnect. But really? I wanted to punish her for moving on when I'd been stuck in a cage. So you terrorized her family. I terrified her with the threat of exposure. Made her meet me, talk to me. And when that wasn't enough, I started watching her house. Learned about Tommy, about you. Anton saw opportunity in it. Realized we could leverage you for the Paragon job. I told myself I was just playing along with his plan, but really, Warner looked at Adrian directly. Really, I think I wanted you to hate her as much as I hated myself. Wanted to destroy her life the way mine had been destroyed. Adrian absorbed this, pieces clicking into place. But you didn't know about the crawl space access at first. No, I found that during surveillance. Old houses like yours, they all have weird construction quirks. I'm good at finding spaces between walls, gaps in foundations. comes from years of hiding. When I found that access point, it felt like a sign, like I was meant to be close to her. That's not romantic. That's obsessive. I know. Warner's eyes were red-rimmed. I know what I am, but I need you to understand, Brandy is a victim in this. Maybe she made bad choices 10 years ago, but she spent the last decade trying to be better. And I almost destroyed that because I couldn't handle my own failures. Why tell me this now? Because you deserve to know the truth before you decide what to do about your marriage. Because Brandy's been calling the FBI station every hour, begging to speak with you, begging to explain. And because Warner's voice grew thick with emotion, because I've spent my whole life being the monster. For once, maybe I can be something else. Even if it's too late. Adrian sat in silence, processing. Everything he believed about Brandy's culpability was shifting, recontextualizing. She'd been coerced, manipulated, threatened. Yes, she'd made mistakes, but under Warner's influence, under his threats. And instead of trusting Adrian to help her, she'd try to handle it alone, try to protect her family the only way she knew how. The evidence you have against her, Adrian said carefully. Is it real? Some of it. Enough to cause her legal problems, but not as much as I claimed. I always overstated what I had. Fear is more powerful than actual consequences. And Anton, he has nothing. He was relying on my leverage over Brandy to control you. Without that, he's just a white-collar criminal with a long list of charges and no bargaining chips. Adrian nodded slowly. Then here's what's going to happen. You're going to cooperate fully with the FBI. You're going to provide detailed statements clearing Brandy of any criminal intent regarding the Silvercrest data. You're going to give them everything they need to put Anton away for a long time. I will. And in return, when your sentencing comes, I'll provide a statement to the judge. Not asking for leniency. You still terrorize my family. But acknowledging that you turned on your brother, that you chose a different path when it mattered. Maybe it won't make a difference. Maybe you'll still get maximum time. But at least it'll be on record that you tried to do one right thing. Warner's eyes glistened. Why would you do that? Because you were right about one thing. You're not just a monster. You're a person who did monstrous things. And people can change, even if they have to do it from inside a prison cell. Adrian opened the car door to leave, then paused. One more thing. That security guard from the jewelry store, the one who's learning to walk again, set up a fund for his medical expenses. Whatever money you and Anton made from previous jobs, whatever assets can be seized, make sure it goes to him first. It won't undo what you did, but it's a start. I will. I promise. Don't promise me. Promise yourself that you'll be someone different when you get out. However many years from now, that is. Adrian walked away from the vehicle, toward where Brennan and Hunt waited. The morning sun was fully up now, and despite the cold November air, Adrian felt something warm spreading through his chest. Not quite forgiveness, not quite peace, but something close to resolution. You're done? Brennan asked. I'm done. And Warner's going to cooperate. He'll clear Brandy, testify against Anton, probably earn himself a slightly reduced sentence. Justice is messy, but it works. Hunt smiled. You're a good man, Adrian Diaz. Not everyone would show that kind of grace. It's not grace. It's practical. Warner broken and remorseful is better for society than Warner hardened and vengeful. And Brandy, Adrian paused, pulling out his phone. Brandy deserves a chance to explain. He called her number. She answered on the first ring, her voice ragged from crying. Adrian? Oh God, Adrian, I've been trying to reach you. I know. I'm sorry. But Brandy, listen, it's over. Warner and Anton are in custody. Tommy is safe. You're safe. And I know about the coercion, about what really happened 10 years ago. We need to talk. Really talk. But not over the phone. Can I see Tommy? Please? I need to hold my son. Come to my mother's house. We'll all be there. And Brandy? I'm angry. I'm hurt. But I'm also willing to listen. That's all I can promise right now. That's more than I deserve. Thank you. Thank you so much. Adrian hung up and looked at the Manhattan skyline, this city of millions where both beauty and ugliness lived side by side, where people made terrible choices and sometimes found redemption, where monsters could become men again, given the right circumstances. His phone buzzed with a text from his mother. Tommy is asking when you're coming home. He says he wants to show you his new dinosaur drawing. Adrian smiled, typing back, on my way. And Mama? Brandy's coming too. Set an extra place at the table. 3 months later, Adrian stood in his home office. They'd moved to a new house in Forest Hills, unable to stay in the place Warner had violated. This office had better light, a view of trees instead of neighbors' walls. He was working on a new project, a community center in Queens, when Brandy appeared in the doorway with coffee. Thought you might need this, she said quietly. They've been doing counseling both together and separately. The road back to trust was long and painful, filled with difficult conversations and moments when Adrian wasn't sure they'd make it. But Tommy needed them both, and beneath the hurt, there was still love. Bruised, tested, but real. Thank you. Adrian accepted the coffee. Tommy asleep? Finally. He wants you to read to him tomorrow night. Something about pirates. Pirates it is. Brandy lingered in the doorway. I heard from Detective Simon. Warner's sentencing is next week. 20 years, but possible parole in 12 with good behavior. And Anton, life without parole. The evidence was overwhelming once Warner testified. Adrian nodded. Justice imperfect but functioning. How do you feel about it? Relieved. Sad. Grateful. Brandy wrapped her arms around herself. Warner wrote me a letter. Through his lawyer. Apologizing, explaining, asking for nothing. I don't know if I'll write back. You don't have to. I know. But part of me wants him to know I forgive him. Not for his sake, but for mine. I can't carry that anger anymore. Adrian understood. Anger was heavy, and they'd both been carrying too much weight. He stood, crossing to his wife, and pulled her into an embrace. She stiffened initially, old hurts dying hard, then relaxed into him. We're going to be okay, Adrian said softly. It'll take time, but we're going to be okay. Promise? I never break my promises. That night, after Brandy went to bed, Adrian stood in Tommy's doorway, watching his son sleep peacefully. Mr. Trunk lay beside him, a faithful guardian against imaginary monsters. The real monsters were gone now, locked away where they couldn't hurt anyone. Tommy stirred, opening one eye. Daddy, just checking on you, buddy. Go back to sleep. No more breathing under the bed. No more breathing under the bed. Just peaceful dreams. Good. Tommy smiled sleepily. Because I'm not scared anymore. Neither am I, Adrian whispered, though he wasn't sure if that was entirely true. But he was working on it. One day, one blueprint, one family dinner at a time. Building something new from the rubble of what had been destroyed. It's what architects did. After all, they looked at empty spaces and imagined structures, looked at broken foundations and planned reconstructions. Warner Taylor had tried to destroy Adrian's life, had invaded his home, and terrorized his family. But in the end, Adrian had done what he did best, built something stronger. Not just a trap, but a path forward. Not just justice, but healing.